Chapter 26-29. The 95th Willpower Attack. The 97th Willpower Attack. The 99th Willpower Attack. Again, Lin Feng only took a few steps back before he continued forward. The light in front of him became more and more intense, as if he had walked out of a long tunnel of light. It had been an era since he entered. Lin Feng was anxious as he could not feel any information from the outside world. However, because of this, his willpower became even more tenacious. There was no other possibility other than leaving this place. The tens of thousands of kilograms of restraints and pressure behind him seemed to have disappeared in an instant. In the endless abyss that was constantly collapsing, the howls of malicious ghosts lingered in his ears, but he could no longer hear them. The pressure of the heavenly Tao that came from the sky also disappeared without a trace at this moment. After passing through a layer of pure white light, there seemed to be a hazy figure in the distance. He was wearing a long robe with golden totems and a noble crown on his head. There was also a pair of eyes that seemed to see through everything. There were layers of illusory figures, sometimes blurry and sometimes dim. Suddenly, the golden-robed figure stretched out his right hand, and an energy similar to willpower attack directly penetrated his chest. Bang! Lin Feng's head shook violently. It was not willpower attack. This was Lin Feng's last thought. The golden-robed figure that was shrouded in endless light suddenly disappeared in front of him. The world spun, and Lin Feng instantly regained his consciousness. At this moment, it was as if he had returned to the abyss of chaos, to the place where the keepsake was. However, there was no nine hells evil chi around him. Instead, there was a thin layer of light surrounding him. What happened? Lin Feng was a little confused. What happened just now? He seemed to have discovered some secret and was suddenly expelled from the space. Who was that golden-robed figure? Why was he there? Hua! Suddenly, Lin Feng found that the transparent crystal was shining. His blood flowed like tears on the huge crystal. At this moment, it was like water and suddenly started to be absorbed by the huge crystal. Clang! An endless amount of energy flowed into his body. The energy that did not belong to the origin of the universe was so majestic and huge. It filled every corner of his body and was full of vitality. However, it did not seem to exist and was illusory. Well, energy? This term suddenly popped up in Lin Feng's mind. With the influx of willpower and all sorts of information, Lin Feng clearly knew that he had successfully refined the token. This was not an ordinary token. It had a familiar name, Qin Emperor Yuanxin. It's the same type of treasure as the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and Qin Emperor's origin crystal in the burial ground of the Yin God. Was it created by that expert named Qin Di? The three of them had one thing in common. Not only were their names similar, but they also contained a unique energy that was different from the chaos treasures in the universe. Otherwise, the Qin Emperor's origin bead and Qin Emperor's origin crystal wouldn't have been left in the burial ground of the Yin God. Wait a minute. Since I've refined the Qin Emperor's origin heart, does that mean I can also refine the Qin Emperor's origin bead and Qin Emperor's origin crystal? Lin Feng suddenly had a strange thought. It seemed possible, but it also seemed irrelevant. However, Lin Feng wasn't in the mood to think about this right now. The majestic energy and information from the Qin Emperor's origin heart surged into his mind. A willpower treasure that was unheard of in the entire universe. City of Will, nine hells baleful aura, all-encompassing. Lin Feng's heart moved. The Qin Emperor's origin heart was too shocking. Ordinary chaos treasures only had 2 to 3 abilities, but the Qin Emperor's origin heart had a total of 7 abilities. 2 main and 2 auxiliary abilities for special and powerful abilities. There were also 3 basic abilities. City of Will, 9 hells baleful aura, all-encompassing. These 3 basic abilities were not complicated and could be easily mastered. They could be cultivated and used at the godly master level. City of Will, with the origin heart as the city, tough and indestructible. The heart is the willpower, and the willpower is the heart. With the willpower as the source, The heart encompasses and controls everything. The boundless universe contains everything. Lin Feng quickly understood the ability of the City of Will. It was like the 10,000 origin mustard stone protecting the soul. The Qin Emperor's origin heart had fused with the body and the heart, forming a steel city that protected the heart and willpower. With the protection of the Qin Emperor's origin heart, the willpower would not collapse under any circumstances. For example, the willpower of some godly master cultivators would collapse under the direct pressure of an almighty and then die. However, with the protection of the Qin Emperor's origin heart, the willpower would be tough and indestructible. For example, walking on the path of endless light like just now, many super geniuses would collapse and die in the end. However, with the Qin Emperor's origin heart, even if the willpower collapsed, the soul would not scatter. When the Nether fought with the universe god of the Seventh Universe's divine inquisition, it was because of the protection of the City of Will that it was not affected by the will of heaven and could use its full strength. Otherwise, even if the will of heaven couldn't suppress the Nether, it would be distracted and its combat power would be greatly reduced. Lin Feng shivered inwardly. The City of Will was even more obvious in a battle with someone of a higher level. Nine Hell's baleful aura. Lin Feng knew that the source of the Nine Hell's baleful aura was the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The Qin Emperor's origin heart was a treasure of willpower, and the Nine Hell's baleful aura affected and resisted willpower. This is relatively useful for me now. Lin Feng understood the introduction of a Nine Hell's baleful aura. When attacking, he could drive the Nine Hell's baleful aura to blast out. There was no need to deliberately control it. The Nine Hell's baleful aura would affect the opponent's willpower. The stronger his willpower, the more Nine Hell's baleful aura he could control. This basic ability was very helpful in battle. The last one was the all-encompassing. The heart is big and tolerant. With the Qin Emperor's origin heart, I can refine all kinds of treasures. Even if my body is not compatible, I can still rely on the Qin Emperor's origin heart to achieve the most perfect fusion. It seemed that this was not very useful. After all, those treasures that could not be perfectly fused would not be able to unleash their full power in the hands of cultivators. For example, if he was proficient in the light and dark heavenly Daos, it would be difficult for him to refine wind treasures. However, he could rely on the Qin Emperor's origin heart to achieve 100% compatibility. However, even if it was compatible, he would still not be able to unleash the power of wind treasures. Therefore, all-encompassing seemed to be of little value. In fact, it was not. Almighty cultivators can't be compatible with the chaos treasures, but with the Qin Emperor's origin heart, they can be compatible. Lin Feng had been longing for the chaos treasures for a long time, but he had to wait until he was a supremacy before he was qualified to refine them. Now that he had the Qin Emperor's origin heart, this was no longer a problem. He already had the ability to unleash the power of many chaos treasures. Moreover, the chaos treasures were divided into different grades. There were higher grade treasures. Even experts like Huang Zun could not be compatible with them, let alone supremacies. However, these treasures could be compatible with the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The Qin Emperor's origin heart was like a high and mighty emperor looking down on his subordinates. Chapter 2630. The information in the Qin Emperor's origin heart was like a pyramid. Right now, he could only see some basic information. There were 3 basic abilities, and the rest were gray. There seemed to be other requirements before the 4 special abilities could be activated. Is it after I become a supremacy? Lin Feng had checked all the information, but there was no mention of it. However, it was clear that the 4 special abilities were the true strength of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. No matter how strong the basic abilities were, they were still basic abilities. They couldn't be compared to special abilities. As for releasing the Nine Hell's baneful aura and creating the crystal teardrop token, it was the foundation of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. Although I've refined it to 100%, this Qin Emperor's origin heart hasn't acknowledged me yet. Lin Feng could feel that he had complete control of the Qin Emperor's origin heart, but some secrets were still out of reach. It seemed that his strength was still far from enough. Treasures had spirits, not to mention a super treasure like the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The golden-robed figure still appeared in Lin Feng's mind. His intuition told him that it was the spirit of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. However, he was quite strong. He should be the one who used the willpower attack. In the end, he was also the one who expelled him from the Qin Emperor's origin heart. It wasn't a Chaos Cardinal treasure, but its power wasn't inferior to a Chaos Cardinal treasure. It might even be stronger. The Qin Emperor's origin heart didn't have chaotic aura and contained special energy that the universe didn't have. Lin Feng didn't think that this was because of the willpower treasure. His teacher, Supremacy Anqing, had said that all Chaos Cardinal treasures were born from the universe and naturally had chaotic aura. Moreover, the Qin Emperor's origin bead and Qin Emperor's origin crystal also didn't have chaotic aura. It was impossible for it to be so coincidental. Heart. Lin Feng could sense the existence of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The four special abilities that extended outwards were gray and blurry, like a machine that was missing four important components. And these four components seemed to be related to the secret of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. It was like a tightly shut door. Standing calmly, Lin Feng vaguely felt a strange energy fluctuation. It seemed to be calling. The call of the heart. The heart's response. Outside, Lin Feng was slightly stunned. What was outside? Nine Hell's Abyss? The ninth abyss of chaos? No, neither of them. Lin Feng clenched his fist, his eyes shining brightly. This feeling of calling was like looking for another part of his body. Because the distance was not far, he could feel it in his heart. It's the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and the Qin Emperor's origin crystal. Lin Feng instantly understood. The three of them were born as one and existed as one. The feeling of the call passed through time and space, and it was directed outside the Yellow Springs Road. However, it didn't leave the burial ground of the Ian God, so its direction was obvious. Qin Emperor's origin beads. Lin Feng was naturally interested in the 108 Qin Emperor's origin beads on top of the Yellow Springs Pond. These beads could strengthen one's body in all aspects. If they were super treasures like the Qin Emperor's origin beads, and he could refine them, they would definitely be one of the top treasures. However, it was just a thought. Not to mention the fact that he couldn't obtain the Qin Emperor's origin pearls in the Ian God burial ground. A portion of them were in the hands of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. How could they possibly give such a precious item to him? As for the Qin Emperor's origin crystal, Lin Feng was not very interested in it. This was the core treasure of the Yin Yang Mountain. It was very useful for cultivators who cultivated the Yin Yang unification heavenly Tao. However, it was useless for him. However, these were all things for later. Let's leave this place first. Lin Feng was slightly worried about the outside world. He had spent an entire era refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The true dragon clone outside couldn't sense it at all, so he didn't know what the situation was like. Under normal circumstances, it had been less than 10 eras since he entered the Nine Hells Abyss. The Milky Way super black hole shouldn't have entered its period of decline. However, he was still worried. It was better to be safe than sorry. How should I leave? Lin Feng looked around. The faint light around him had already disappeared, but the boundless Nine Hells' baleful aura still covered him. The entire 8th abyss of chaos was like a huge swamp. The difference was that he was completely unaffected by the Nine Hells' baleful aura. It wasn't just because his will was much stronger than before. It was also because the Qin Emperor's origin heart in his body made him completely immune to the Nine Hells' baleful aura. He could even use the Nine Hells' baleful aura to attack. Why would he be afraid of its corrosion? When a majestic Nine Hells' baleful aura entered his body, it was like a tired bird returning to its nest. Not only did it not affect his will, but it also turned into a unique energy that nourished his body. It seems like I can absorb it. Lin Feng tried to control the Qin Emperor's origin heart. In an instant, the Nine Hells' baleful aura around him was absorbed by the Qin Emperor's origin heart. It gradually turned into mist and disappeared. The bottom of the 8th abyss of chaos was clear at a glance. There's a path. Lin Feng quickly found a way out. It was right behind the original location of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. It should have been sealed previously, but now it was exposed. It was like a stairway to heaven to leave the Yellow Springs. That's why the Chaos Guardian said that I have to refine the token before I can leave. Lin Feng understood. He didn't hesitate anymore and sped up. The stairway to heaven was long. Lin Feng was still worried that it might be dangerous. However, after traveling for a while, he realized that it was just a stairway. After he refined the Qin Emperor's origin heart, the eighth abyss of chaos was actually dead. Golden light shone, and dawn broke. Lin Feng stepped on the endless stairway. It was as if he had walked out of the endless Yellow Springs. Lin Feng was surprised by what he saw. It was a prosperous Nine Hells tribe. There were all kinds of steeple buildings. Most of the Nine Hells tribe experts were Seven Hells warriors. There were also many Eight Hells war gods. There were even hundreds of Nine Hells war venerables. Compared to this, the Huang tribe in the burial ground of the Ian god was far inferior. Ha! A familiar hearty laughter sounded. Lin Feng looked over. The white-bearded elder in the distance had shrunk the ground into an inch. He instantly appeared in front of Lin Feng. His narrowed eyes were full of smiles. He was very kind. Behind him, the black-bearded elder also walked over. He still had a cold expression. His eyes were bright, and he was carefully sizing Lin Feng up. "Where's this?" Lin Feng had doubts in his heart. He bowed slightly. "Greetings, seniors. My name is Huang Yu. I am the first son of Godfather." The white-bearded elder chuckled. "Huang Zhou, the second son of Godfather," the black-bearded elder said. "Senior Huang Yu, Senior Huang Zhou." Lin Feng bowed again. From the expressions and actions of the two seniors, he could see that they were different from when they first met. It was probably because he had refined the Qin Emperor's origin heart. "No need to be so polite. Since you have passed all the tests set by Godfather, we are on the same side in the future," Huang Yu said with a smile. "All the tests?" Lin Feng was stunned. "Isn't there the ninth abyss of chaos?" "This is the ninth abyss of chaos." Huang Zhou's voice was sonorous. Chapter 2631. Had he passed all the tests? Lin Feng had always thought that there were 9 tests and that the Nine Hells Abyss had a total of 9. He hadn't expected the 8th abyss to be the last test. It made sense, as no cultivator had ever successfully passed the 8th abyss. The endless Nine Hells evil qi was secondary. The most dangerous part was refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart. Lin Feng clearly remembered that he had reached his limit halfway through the refining process. He didn't even know how he had completed the last third of the journey. Thinking back, it was too bumpy. Lin Feng didn't even have the slightest confidence that he would be able to complete it again. Since the fall of Father, countless divine master geniuses have fallen in the Nine Hells Abyss. Lin Feng, you are the first and the last to pass all the tests set by Father. Huang Yu stroked his white beard and nodded in satisfaction. The last. Lin Feng didn't understand. Huang Yu said, "Do you think there will be a second Qin Emperor's origin heart?" Lin Feng was speechless for a moment. Father obtained the Qin Emperor's origin heart from the great desolate sky. To be precise, he obtained a complete set of 5, Huang Yu said. These are Hongmeng's source items. Even if the 5 pieces are separated, each of them is comparable to a supreme chaos treasure. Of course, given your current strength, you can't unleash the true power of the Qin Emperor's origin heart. Hongmeng's source items. Supreme chaos treasure. Lin Feng sighed inwardly. He had learned from the Taiqiong deity realm that the highest grade of chaos treasure was a peak chaos treasure. He hadn't expected there to be a supreme chaos treasure, let alone a Hongmeng source item that was even stronger than a supreme chaos treasure. Where was the great desolate sky? Don't doubt it. Did you experience a willpower impact when refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart? Huang Yu asked. Lin Feng nodded and his eyes lit up. Is this the special ability of the Qin Emperor's origin heart? Huang Yu chuckled. When Father used the willpower impact back then, ultimate gods and cosmos gods of the same level were killed in one blow. Even Yuan venerates and cosmos gods would be affected and their strength would be greatly reduced. Amazing, Lin Feng praised in his heart. He had tasted the terrifying power of the willpower impact before. He was caught off guard and almost shattered his willpower. This was only the willpower impact cast by the Qin Emperor's original heart spirit. It must be even more powerful when cast by the invincible divine Master Netherworld. Forgive this junior for being presumptuous, but how did Senior Yellow Spring fall that day? Lin Feng asked the question in his heart. Huang Zhou didn't say anything and only glanced at Huang Yu. Obviously, Huang Yu's status was above his, and as the first son of Godfather, Huang Yu had followed Godfather for the longest time and knew more about him. It's a long story. Huang Yu stroked his beard and let out a long sigh. He placed one hand behind his back and gazed into the distance, and his brows were slightly knit together. He wanted to say something, but hesitated, as if he didn't want to evoke painful memories. Everything started from when Godfather obtained the Qin Emperor's origin bead. Huang Yu sighed softly and spoke tirelessly. Just as he said to Lin Feng before, all the mysteries would be revealed to Lin Feng in the 9th chaotic abyss. He didn't hide anything because this was originally set by Godfather. As a descendant, Huang Yu naturally followed. Lin Feng pricked up his ears and listened. From Huang Yu's mouth, the story of Yellow Spring's life could be said to be a legend. With top-notch bloodline, top-notch inheritance, and top-notch encounters, Yellow Spring was the pride of the billions of races in the universe. When he was at the Divine Master level, he could easily kill Huang Zun. By chance, he obtained the Qin Emperor's origin bead. Only then did he know about the path of the primordial chaos supremacy. It was a taboo in the universe because this was a cultivation path that overturned the universe's operating rules and would be suppressed by the heavenly Tao. It wasn't affecting the universe's heavenly Tao, but overturning it. Simply put, it was a cultivation path that made the universe's heavenly Tao feel dangerous and even terrified. However, the primordial chaos supremacy was too powerful. Therefore, even though he knew that he would be suppressed by the universe's heavenly Tao and would be angered by the universe's supreme law, Yellow Spring still walked this heaven-defying path without any regrets. True experts have their own beliefs. Even the will of the heavenly Tao can't affect them. Lin Feng nodded. If it was him, he would do the same. As an expert, he must have firm beliefs. But Godfather still underestimated the universe's heavenly Tao. Huang Yu sighed and shook his head. Back then, Godfather didn't know that there was a powerful hidden force in the universe called the 7th Universe's Godly Inquisition. The 7th Universe's Godly Inquisition. Lin Feng knew about it. There were clear records in the books of the Huang tribe. He had also seen the indestructible remains of the universe god in the various Huang tribes. The 7th Universe's Godly Inquisition is protected by the universe and maintains the stability of the universe's heavenly Tao, Huang Yu said. It's a lackey, Huang Zhou interrupted with a look of disdain. What bullshit gift from the will of the heavenly Tao? Inheritance? After receiving the inheritance, one's strength will never improve and will forever lose the possibility of becoming a powerful existence. You can't say that, Huang Yu said. Each of the 18 universe gods of the 7th Universe's Godly Inquisition is comparable to a peak Yuan venerate. In the 7th Universe, they can compete with almighties. Even Godfather can't do anything to them. Huang Zhou sneered. In the end, weren't they still killed by Godfather? Lin Feng was secretly shocked. Huang Quan's strength was too terrifying. The 18 universe gods were protected by the will of the heavenly Tao and were comparable to almighties in the 7th universe. Yet he could still kill them? Two fists can't fight four hands. No matter how strong Godfather is, he is only a godly venerate. Fighting against a peak Yuan venerate is already his limit. Huang Yu sighed. In the 7th universe, he was besieged by 18 universe gods and was seriously injured. In the end, he had no choice but to escape from the 7th universe. And then? Lin Feng was even more curious. And then Humph. He was killed by a few other lackeys. Huang Zhou gritted his teeth and said indignantly, "A dignified almighty is actually so despicable as to take advantage of someone's perilous state. If Godfather's strength was intact, it's useless." Huang Yu shook his head. In the seventh universe, almighties are suppressed by the heavenly Tao and can't use their full strength. That's why Godfather can compete with them. However, after leaving the seventh universe, Godfather is no match for an almighty even at his peak. Those almighties are, Lin Feng asked, Celestial Emperor Aokong, Ancestor Qing, Old Ancestor Taiqiao. Huang Zhou's eyes were filled with deep hatred, as if it was engraved in his heart. Lin Feng was shocked. Celestial Emperor Aokong was the founder of the 30,000 spatial boundaries. Ancestor Qing was the founder of the Murdering God Tower. As for Ancestor Taiqiao, he was the most familiar with him. It was because of Ancestor Taiqiao that he had come here to explore the secrets of the Primal Chaos Venerate and embarked on the path of the Primal Chaos Venerate. That's not right, Lin Feng thought to himself. If that was the case, why did Ancestor Taiqiao want him to become an Primal Chaos Venerate? Why did he want him to come to the Yellow Springs path? Wasn't there a contradiction? Wait, Lin Feng frowned and looked at Huang Yu and Huang Zhou. I still don't understand something. Why would becoming in Primal Chaos Venerate subvert the universe's heavenly Tao, infuriate the heavenly Tao, and affect the operation of the universe's heavenly Tao nomological laws? Chapter 2632. Let me ask you, what are mortals afraid of? Huang Zhou glanced at Lin Feng. Death. Lin Feng didn't hesitate at all. Let me ask you again, what are most cultivators afraid of? Huang Zhou asked again. Lin Feng paused. Death. Then, what is the universe's heavenly will afraid of? Huang Zhou asked again. Death too? Lin Feng somewhat understood, but he still didn't understand. Why would becoming an origin chaos supremacy threaten the universe and cause it to die? Is it just disrupting the normal operation of the universe's heavenly will? Or will the origin chaos supremacy become so powerful that they can destroy the universe after becoming an almighty? Huang Yu grinned and laughed. Destroying the universe? Only you can think of that. No matter how powerful an almighty is, they can't destroy the universe. However, Huang Yu stroked his beard and said meaningfully, if an origin chaos supremacy wants to become an almighty, they have to take over the original universe. Take over the original universe. Lin Feng was shocked. All his questions were answered in an instant. This was the most direct stake. If an origin chaos supremacy wanted to become an almighty, they had to take over the original universe. If the original universe wanted to protect itself, the heavenly will would naturally destroy the origin chaos supremacy. Can't other Yuan venerate powerhouses take over the original universe? Lin Feng asked. Huang Zhou shook his head. They don't have the universe's life aura and can't touch the origin of the universe. Lin Feng nodded thoughtfully. So the origin chaos supremacy has the universe's life aura. Lin Feng opened his arms and sensed the energy in his body. He frowned slightly. He didn't feel any universe's life aura in his body. The origin chaos supremacy just had a different cultivation path from other supremacies. Why was there such a big difference? Could it only happen after breaking through to become a supremacy? Huang Yu seemed to have seen through Lin Feng's doubts and smiled. This is the last step to becoming an origin chaos supremacy. Take over the original black domain. If you succeed, you can become an origin chaos supremacy. The last step was to take over the original black domain. Lin Feng was stunned. The so-called original black domain referred to the black domain where he was born. Simply put, his original black domain was the Milky Way super black hole. One of the reasons he came to the Netherworld mystic realm was to save the Milky Way super black hole. Now that he was going to become an origin primal chaos supremacy, the last step was to possess the Milky Way super black hole. What a joke. For a moment, Lin Feng's heart was like raging waves, unable to calm down. What's wrong? You can't bear to part with it? Huang Yu was an old and experienced man. He had long since seen through Lin Feng's character. Is there any other way? Lin Feng was unwilling to do so. Huang Yu shook his head. The only way to obtain the life aura of the universe is to possess the original black domain at the almighty level before the universe in one's body is born. Then, the black domain will merge perfectly with the original black domain and create a perfect inner universe. Since the black domain was born from the universe itself, the inner universe that is born when one becomes a venerable will naturally contain the life aura of the universe. Then why can't you possess other black domain? Lin Feng did not understand. Huang Yu stroked his long white beard and looked at the sky. The universe nurtures and gives life to everything. But only the black domain is the crystallization of the universe's life and contains rich life aura of the universe. Therefore, the special life forms born in the universe's secret realms or even unique life forms in the universe. Although they are extremely talented and powerful, they do not have the ability to extend their lives. Although the life forms born in the black domain are weak, they are not actually born from the universe. Instead, the black domain gives them life aura. Lin Feng nodded. Senior, what you mean is that the universe gives the black domain life aura, and the black domain gives us life aura. You can say that, Huang Yu said leisurely. Possession is what you cultivators call it. To be precise, it is the evolution of life force. Ordinary cultivators' life force might be 0, 1, or 0, 2. In bloodline experts' life force might be 0, 8, or 0, 9, but it will never reach 1, 0. Only by becoming an origin primal chaos venerable can one reach the perfect 1, 0. The universe's life force is 2, 0. Only by reaching 1, 0 can one reach 2, 0. So, do you understand? Lin Feng understood a lot. In fact, it was just walking up the stairs. He was now on the first step of the stairs. Walking up to possess the original black domain was the second step, and then walking up to possess the original universe was the third step. On this flight of stairs, it was naturally impossible to jump to another flight of stairs in an instant. If he was not on the first step of the stairs, it was also impossible to walk to the second and third steps of the stairs. Don't think that possessing the original black domain is easy. Huang Yu said to Lin Feng, the black domains born in the universe are big and small. Some are excellent and some are poor. Just like a clan, each clan member has different aptitudes and talents. Ordinary black domains are relatively simple to possess, but it is difficult to possess the big black domain. The most difficult is the super black domain. Of course, the stronger the life aura of the black domain that is possessed, the greater the harvest. This is related to how far you can go in the end. Father God only possessed the big black domain back then. Although the success rate was relatively high, the loss of combat strength and potential was not small. The Divine Master Nether, who was invincible, had lost a lot of combat strength. Lin Feng was a little confused. How strong would it be to achieve the perfection of the primal chaos venerable? Father God said that even if he possessed the original universe, the success rate would not be more than 10%. Huang Yu said, if the initial possession was the super black domain, the success rate would be at least 50%. One step wrong, one step wrong. But even so, the original will of the universe did not let Father God go and pursued him. Damn it. Thinking of the past, Huang Yu's face was cold. He had followed Father God for the longest time and experienced the most. Father God was chased too miserably. Lin Feng, was the original black domain you were born in a big black domain, a medium black domain, or a small black domain? Huang Yu asked. Super black domain. Lin Feng replied. The galaxy's super black domain was naturally a super black domain. He already knew. Huang Yu and Huang Zhou's eyes suddenly lit up. They helped Father God Nether to select an inheritor, hoping to satisfy Father God's wish. The original black domain was the best super black domain, but this was not controlled by them. The size and level of the original black domain was predetermined at the beginning of each cultivator's life. Haha, a great opportunity, a great opportunity. Huang Yu laughed heartily. Huangzhou also showed a touch of joy. For them, this was a great opportunity. Inheritance, bloodline, treasures, these were all illusory. But the black domain one was born in could not be changed. It was predestined. The universe's peerless, extraordinary genius, Nether, was also born in the big black domain. But Lin Feng, although his talent was average, was born in the super black domain. Chapter 26:33. However, it's very difficult to possess the super black domain. Huangzhou was a little worried. The life force of the super black domain was too strong, and it was not easy to possess it. It's okay. Wait patiently until it's in its destruction stage. The success rate will be much higher, Huang Yu said. Destruction stage. It meant that the super black hole was at the end of its road. Its life had come to an end, and there was no cure. The super black hole at the end of its decline stage was like a dying old man. It could no longer absorb energy from the outside and could only rely on its own energy to support its consumption. Once it entered its destruction stage, the super black hole would enter a frenzied state and destroy everything in the black hole, including the star system and life, until there was nothing left to devour. It would collapse and explode, completely destroyed. Lin Feng knew. Without the wandering planet and the resources and treasures given by his teacher, the Milky Way super black hole would have entered its destruction stage. Even now, it was very close to its destruction stage. Lin Feng, what stage is your original black domain now? Huang Yu asked. It's in its final decline stage. Lin Feng did not hide it. Really? Huang Yu and Huang Zhou exclaimed in unison. They were overjoyed. Lin Feng nodded. I used treasures to provide energy for it to absorb and slow down its decline. However, it can only last for 1 or 2 years at most. Without the universal spring of life, it will enter its destruction stage. Universal spring of life? Huang Yu was stunned and laughed. It doesn't make much sense. The reason the black domain is declining is that its life force is draining. Drinking a mouthful of spring water will only delay it a little. The essence of a universal spring of life is to burn the life force. Naturally, it will extend its lifespan. However, draining the pond to catch all the fish is likely to destroy the life force of the black domain itself and damage its life force. I don't recommend you do that. Although it will be easier to possess the super black domain after its life force is damaged, the price is likely to be difficult to possess the original universe in the future. Actually, you don't have to feel burdened. The black domain itself doesn't have intelligence and isn't alive. Just like how the universe isn't alive, it's a manifestation of the heavenly Tao's rules. Therefore, by taking over the black domain and the universe, you can directly comprehend the heavenly Tao. On the other hand, after the possession, the black domain will fuse into your inner universe and be connected to your life. It will live and die with you. There will be no limit to it, and there will be no decline or destruction. Huang Yu spoke tirelessly. Every word of his was reasonable. However, there was something in Lin Feng's heart that he couldn't explain. Let me think about it, okay? Lin Feng let out a long sigh and closed his eyes, and his heart was extremely complicated and difficult to understand, even though he was clearly aware of what Senior Huang Yu had said. But, in a word, it was difficult to explain. Huang Yu and Huang Zhou looked at each other helplessly. He could feel that Lin Feng's nature was pure and kind, and he valued relationships. However, he also knew that Lin Feng's conviction was firm, and he would not be easily swayed by others. To be able to refine the Qin Emperor's origin heart, it was enough to show how strong Lin Feng's will was. Even an ultimate god expert could not be compared to him. Lin Feng's heart was hesitant. He knew that Senior Huang Yu did not lie to him. The black domain was the top life form born in the universe, and it contained the breath of the universe's life force. He had to go against the heavens to save the black domain, and it was against the heavenly Tao's rules. Therefore, although there was the spring of life, it was actually burning the breath of the universe's life force. There was always a price to pay in order to get something. Was it worth it? If the galactic super black domain's breath of life is damaged, it will affect the possession and cause irreversible damage to me and the galactic super black domain. Lin Feng thought to himself, if he gave it the spring of life, it could live for tens of thousands of years. He could wait. But what about tens of thousands of years later? When its life force was exhausted, it would be truly dead. But now, there was a permanent solution. Possession did not mean that he would eat the black domain. It only meant that he would integrate himself into the black domain and the black domain into his inner universe. This was a mutually beneficial relationship. The black domain was not a life form. If it was, it would not have destroyed everything during its destruction period, including the planets and lives within. It seemed heartless, but in fact it was not. The black domain was just a manifestation of the heavenly Tao. Everything operated according to the will of the heavenly Tao. There's no need to be short-sighted. I'll do what I have to do. Lin Feng had already sorted out his thoughts. He was not a person who hesitated and hesitated, so he would make a decision if he had to. If the black domain was really a life form in the universe and the land that gave birth to him, he would give it up even if there were 10,000 reasons. But it was not. It was a piece of soil that gave life to the flowers. If he wanted to protect this piece of soil, he did not have to let it be outside and shelter it from the wind and rain. He could put in a greenhouse and protect it under his wings. Soil was still soil. There would be no change, just a slight shift in position. Lin Feng opened his eyes and smiled, looking at Huang Yu and Huang Zhou. Seniors, please tell me exactly how to do the body possession. Everything was clear now that he had thought it through. Lin Feng did not leave immediately. Instead, he stayed in Huang Yu and Huang Zhou's tribes for a while. During this time, he went to all 36 Huang family tribes with the war venerables of 9 hells. He went to all the big yellow springs that he had never entered before. Although his control of his body and soul had reached the limit, the big yellow springs itself strengthened every aspect of his body, including the improvement of his mixed energy and the expansion of his sea of consciousness. It was always good to have more. 3. 2 times of mixed energy, 57 times of sea of consciousness. Lin Feng completed all the strengthening. His sea of consciousness was boundlessly vast, far exceeding that of an ordinary one-thought venerable. This was still the multiplier before he became a primordial chaos venerable. Once he became a primordial chaos venerable, it would be even more terrifying. The biggest flaw was undoubtedly mixed energy. After all, the human body was not big enough, and humans were not very good at mixed energy. However, although mixed energy was little, humans were often very smart and could make up for it in terms of realm. How could everything in the world go according to one's will? Lin Feng was already very satisfied to be able to strengthen to this extent. In the 9th abyss of chaos, he made many friends with the war venerables of 9 hells and learned many secrets of the battle. He even saw the remains of the great eternity god. Everything was so fresh. Time flew by. Lin Feng stayed in the Yellow Springs secret realm for a total of 10 years. At this time, the Earth where the true dragon avatar was on could clearly feel a terrifying storm descending. The Milky Way super black hole has finally entered the period of destruction. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. This meant that it was time for him to take the final step to become a primordial chaos venerable. Possession. Chapter 2634. Taking over another's body was what cultivators called it. To be precise, it was the advancement of one's life force. For example, a family had a main bloodline and a branch bloodline. In the past, the advancement of one's life force had always been on the branch bloodline. Not only was it difficult to advance, but it was also difficult to reach the true core of the family. However, the advancement of one's life force this time was equivalent to entering the main bloodline and becoming a unique successor of the family. There might be a second or third cultivator who could become an origin source chaotic venerate in the future, but at least for now, only Lin Feng could do it. Willpower is the key. A divine master cultivator must have a willpower comparable to an ordinary Yuan venerate in order to take over a great dark domain. A divine master cultivator must have a willpower comparable to a peak Yuan venerate in order to take over a great dark domain. This was the purpose of the 9 Purgatories Abyss. Willpower was the key to taking over another's body compared to controlling one's soul. This was because the advancement of one's life force required too much. Ordinary divine master cultivators who had a willpower comparable to a venerate were already 1 in a million. Those who had a willpower comparable to Huangzun were even rarer. Even though Lin Feng's willpower was amazing, it was only comparable to a peak Huangzun when he entered the 9 Purgatories Abyss. His willpower had only reached the peak ultimate venerate level after completing a series of tempering in the 9 Purgatories Abyss and reaching the bottom of the 8th Chaotic Abyss. The key was refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart. The process of refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart itself was to hone one's willpower in all aspects. By the time the final refinement conditions were reached, Lin Feng's willpower had already reached the Yuan venerate level. Even if the effects of the Qin Emperor's origin heart were not taken into account, his willpower would still be comparable to a peak Yuan venerate's after cultivating in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. However, the Qin Emperor's origin heart would undoubtedly save a lot of effort. The Qin Emperor's origin heart was a supreme willpower treasure comparable to a supreme chaotic ultimate treasure and could strengthen one's willpower. Therefore, in terms of willpower alone, Lin Feng was even better than a peak Yuan venerate powerhouse. When one's willpower was sufficient, the biggest problem of taking over another's body would be easily solved. The other basic conditions were relatively easy to achieve. Before Lin Feng, there had been countless cultivators who had succeeded. Recently, the Ape King and Zhu Qi had all achieved it. There were as many geniuses in the universe as there were hairs on a cow, and there would always be outstanding geniuses. Moreover, with a top-notch cultivation ground like the 9 Hells Abyss, as long as he had enough potential, he could unearth all of his talents. Although these geniuses could no longer refine the Qin Emperor's origin heart, everything had its pros and cons. Without the 9 Hells' baneful qi, their biggest threat in the 9 Hells Abyss would be eliminated. Even if they reached the 8th Abyss of Chaos, would they be able to refine Emperor Qin's origin core? In the end, he followed in the footsteps of the Ape King, and Zhu Qi Lin Feng had actually saved their lives by refining the Qin Emperor's origin heart. In time, if they had strong wills, they might have a chance to become Origin Chaos Venerables. Even if they didn't become Origin Chaos Venerables, they would still be the top Chaos Venerables and perfect Chaos Venerables. They would still be venerables among venerables. Back then, Yuan Venerate Yunmen had chosen to give up, but now, he was still a peak Yuan Venerate powerhouse that could intimidate billions of races. Back then, Hierarch Yin Wu had given up. Now, he was known as an invincible hierarch in the universe and could even defeat Yuan Venerate powerhouses. There was always more than one path of cultivation. However, Lin Feng had chosen the most difficult and strongest path. Come back after you complete the possession. Father God has left something for you. This was what Huang Yu had told Lin Feng before he left the 9th Abyss of Chaos. Lin Feng understood that this should be the real thing that Senior Yellow Springs had left for him. Only by successfully possessing the original Black Domain and becoming a new Origin Chaos Venerate would he be qualified to possess it. After becoming an Origin Chaos Venerate, you will truly stand on the opposite side of the universe. Lin Feng traveled in the central area of the Milky Way Super Black Domain. The terrifying, devouring power of the black hole tried to tear him apart, but couldn't do anything to Lin Feng. Ordinary God-grade powerhouses could already resist the devouring power of the black hole, let alone Lin Feng. He could easily resist it with his physical body alone. An Origin Chaos Venerate couldn't comprehend the universe's heavenly Tao. This was because the origin will of the universe didn't allow an Origin Chaos Venerate to threaten its existence. Lin Feng knew very well that when the time came, the executioners of Universe 7's divine tribunal, the enforcers, and even the Ian gods would come after him, just like how they had hunted Senior Yellow Springs back then. They wouldn't rest until they were dead. This was a path of no return, a path of no return that opposed the entire universe. This is the real Yellow Springs path. Lin Feng smiled and didn't mind it at all. Since he was ready to embark on this path, he naturally had no regrets. So what if he had to become the enemy of the entire universe? The path of the strong had always been to stand alone and walk alone. There had always been only one emperor. Lin Feng was ambitious. Every true powerhouse had ambition. A soldier who didn't want to become a general wasn't a good soldier. Walking on this path of a powerhouse, Lin Feng was prepared for everything that could happen, even if he had to become the public enemy of the entire universe. In life, one should only strive for unity. It's fine if I don't know, but if I know that there is such a path and don't walk it, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Let's give it a try. Let me see how difficult this path is. Lin Feng smiled calmly and didn't have any psychological restrictions. He only cared about Earth and Huaxia. When he took over the Milky Way superdark region and merged it with his internal universe, it would naturally fall into his internal universe and live and die with him. If one day I'm really unfortunate enough to fall, Old Man Jiaxing has already promised to protect Earth for me and protect the Milky Way superdark domain. Lin Feng returned to the Taiqiong revered god realm and returned to the Qian revered platform. Old Man Jiaxing had once promised to fulfill Lin Feng's wish to seize the crown of the universe war. And this was Lin Feng's only request, to protect the safety of his loved ones. With the strength of an almighty, it could be done easily. This path seems to be one with no chance of survival, risking universal condemnation and causing one to fall into a state of eternal damnation. However, one can't see it as that simple. Lin Feng's state of mind was clear and wasn't affected at all. If it was really such a heinous crime, why would old ancestor Tai Qiong let him walk on this path? Why didn't old man Zhai Xing dissuade him? In the fall of Huang Quan, what exactly happened back then? Challenging the will of the heavenly axiom, it's quite interesting. Lin Feng smiled. He had grown from an ordinary Huaxia youth until now. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would become an enemy of the will of the heavenly axiom. That feeling made one's blood boil inexplicably. Challenge. Exciting. Fate is always in one's own hands. Since I have chosen to walk the path of the primal chaos supremacy, no one can affect me, including the will of the heavenly axiom. Lin Feng had already entered the Milky Way super dark region's origin core, where the devouring power was the most terrifying. He stood there like a rock, unmoving like a mountain. His willpower was at its peak, and his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. He didn't regret walking on this path. Chapter 26:35. Black holes had extremely high density and mass, and they could devour everything. However, their essence was still life in a universe, a part of the universe. To be precise, black holes were the most complete life in the universe, because only black holes had the most primitive and purest life aura of the universe. The devouring of black holes was a process of self-evolution. It was like a baby absorbing a large amount of energy to grow up. What was a black hole after it grew up? The primordial universe. Lin Feng not only had a preliminary understanding of the primordial chaos venerable, but he also had a certain understanding of the evolution of the universe and the will of the heavenly Tao. These were all recorded in the ninth abyss of chaos. There were billions of black holes in the universe, and most of them were like ordinary people. When life reached the end, they would collapse and be destroyed. However, there were also some black holes that would mutate during the process of devouring or absorb enough energy to undergo a fundamental transformation. Some black holes would even grow to the limit of perfection. The Big Bang formed the primordial universe. Black holes were the children of the universe. The stronger the life aura of the universe, the larger the volume and mass of the black hole. Therefore, the life aura of the super black hole was the strongest. Unfortunately, although the life aura of the Milky Way super black hole is strong, it can't grow to the limit of perfection. Lin Feng sighed. Just like cultivators with good aptitudes might not be able to achieve great success, the Milky Way super black hole couldn't even transform. Just like ordinary people, it devoured and absorbed energy for itself until the end of its lifespan. Perhaps this was the will of the Milky Way super black hole itself. Senior Huang Yu's words are the most vivid. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile when he thought of what Senior Huang Yu had said. According to him, his possession of the Milky Way super black hole was equivalent to giving a mortal an elixir of immortality. As for the life aura of the universe that had seized it, the Milky Way super black hole had already died of old age. Moreover, for a mortal with ordinary aspirations, it wasn't that important whether he had top-notch aptitude or not. As for what Senior Huang Zhou had said, it was much more direct. The universe created life, but life also created the universe. Lin Feng thought about it, and it was indeed so. There were two sides to everything, and they were all created by themselves. Be it the universe or the black hole, they did not have their own consciousness. Their evolution was more driven by the will of the heavenly Tao and the cycle of the supreme laws of the universe. If one minded it too much, one would lose one's mind. The Milky Way super black hole is huge. At this moment, Lin Feng was already standing where the black hole chaotic origin heart was. This was where the essence of the black hole was located. It was also where the gravitational force was the most terrifying. The super black hole's tearing force was so strong that it could easily crush a deity expert into pieces. But to Lin Feng, it didn't make much of a difference. Touching the black hole chaotic origin heart, Shui Ying could feel how huge the entire Milky Way supermassive black hole was. The process of possession was dangerous. Even though the soul and willpower were essential for possession, if one's fleshy body was not strong enough, it would be impossible for one to resist against the endless gravitational force. At that moment, the gravitational force of the entire Milky Way super black hole was extremely terrifying. Therefore, in order to become an origin chaos supremacy, one had to have a perfect chaotic body and perfect control over one's body. Only by having perfect control over one's power could one control one's body to maintain a perfect balance and construct the universe within the primal chaos origin venerable. Lin Feng was ready. With perfect control over his soul, Shui Ying immediately sent it into the black hole chaotic origin heart. This was not the black hole chaotic origin heart formed after the black hole collapsed. Such a black hole chaotic origin heart was merely an empty shell and did not have much value. Most paragons would not be interested in it. The true black hole chaotic origin heart controlled and connected the entire super black hole. It was not just the brain of the black hole, it was also the source of all devouring energy from the black hole. Even the aura of the cosmos existed within the black hole chaotic origin heart. Lin Feng hit the nail on the head. Since he had begun the possession, he would not have any second thoughts. All his soul, energy, and willpower fused into the black hole chaotic origin heart. Shui Ying arrived at a terrifying place filled with endless darkness. A frenzied energy tore at his soul. It was as if countless dark beasts were attacking him from within the darkness. Chang. Lin Feng's willpower was as firm as iron. After experiencing the refinement of Emperor Qin's origin heart, Shui Ying became even calmer. His soul covered the black hole chaotic origin heart, allowing it to receive everything. His willpower and consciousness wrapped around the black hole chaotic origin heart and withstood all pressure. The essence of possession was seize. The evolution of life energy came from the cosmos life aura within the black hole. The cosmos life aura only existed within the cosmos. The black hole was equivalent to a human's infant. Even if it grew to its limit, it was still an infant. Its cosmos life aura did not belong to it. Instead, it was bestowed by the cosmos. Hence, when the black hole collapsed and exploded, the cosmos life aura within the black hole chaotic origin heart naturally disappeared. Because the black hole chaotic origin heart was neither the black hole itself nor the cosmos. If a cultivator wanted to obtain the cosmos life aura, he could only do so at the moment when the cosmos in his body was formed. That was also when he stepped into the supreme realm from the peak of Godmaster. Since ancient times, there have been many cultivators who had attempted to do so. But other than Paragon Origin Primal Chaos, it was impossible for other cultivators to succeed. The perfect primal chaos body perfect primal chaos soul, perfect control of the fleshy body, perfect control of the soul. But the most important thing was willpower, because the cosmos life aura was bestowed by the heavenly Tao. Without sufficient willpower to resist the heavenly Tao, how could one accommodate the cosmos life aura? Pong. At this moment, Lin Feng could feel the descent of the heavenly Tao. Even though he was in the boundless darkness, he could still feel the wrath of the heavens. It was as if he had snatched away its most precious treasure and touched its reverse scale. Hong, hong, hong. Thunder rumbled. The heavenly Tao was enraged. A terrifying heavenly Tao pressure came crashing down. The wrath of the heavens was akin to the apocalypse for mortals. It was sufficient to destroy everything. Lin Feng remained unmoving like a mountain. The Qin Emperor origin heart within his body was shining brightly. It guarded his body. No matter how strong the heavenly Tao pressure was, it could not gain any advantage over the Qin Emperor origin heart. That was like another powerful force outside the cosmos that could resist against the heavenly Tao. Lin Feng's body was protected by the Qin Emperor origin heart. His willpower was firm and unyielding. He was like an iron-blooded army that withstood the ferocious attacks of the enemy. Hua, an endless gravitational force was applied to his body. It was like his body was filled with lead. Many Buzhou mountains turned into mustard seeds and landed on his body. Every inch of his skin was withstanding a terrifying force. The gravitational force could tear apart and destroy everything. His soul was experiencing an unprecedented impact. Without the protection of the spiritual sea, his soul was like a lone army that had entered the enemy's formation. Possession was even more like taking the head of an enemy general. The Milky Way superblack hole. Even if it was in the destruction stage, possession was still the most terrifying trial. Chapter 2636. Lin Feng did not have a path of retreat. This was similar to a soul attack, yet there were some differences. If the soul attack failed, his soul could be heavily injured and he would fall into a deep slumber. But if the possession failed, he would truly die. There was no other possibility. There is only one path to becoming an origin primal chaos supremacy. He had to sacrifice everything. Again, Lin Feng was naturally not afraid of the will of the heavenly Tao. He had already prepared himself. If he could not even withstand the current will of the heavenly Tao, how could he face the crazy slaughter of the will of the heavenly Tao when he became an origin primal chaos supremacy? Since he had already stepped on this path, he would not turn back. Perfect control of the chaotic energy. Even if billions of gravitational forces were added to his body, he could still control it perfectly and achieve balance. His soul possessed the black hole chaotic origin heart, absorbing everything within. Once he withstood the first wave of impact, he would be halfway to success. His soul had already gained the upper hand. His willpower took the lead. What Senior Yellow Spring recorded was that the most crucial part of possession was his willpower. When one's willpower could resist the will of the heavenly Tao, the resistance of the black hole was actually completely bearable. Even the resistance of the black hole chaotic origin heart was completely futile. After losing the control of the will of the heavenly Tao, it was like an army without a commander. The black hole was just a straggler. Even if it was a super black hole, Cosmos Life Aura, Lin Feng finally came into contact with the most extreme existence. It was like the most precious treasure in the land of treasures. The moment he came into contact with it, his soul trembled deeply. It was like a cultivator who loved his saber as much as his life, seeing the most top-notch saber technique secret manual. The Cosmos Life Aura contained all the Cosmos Heavenly Tao, Cosmos laws, and everything. Even if it was just a flash in the pan. For Lin Feng, this moment of contact was a perfect transformation of his life. This was the clearest increase in his life force. It was as if he was sitting on the clouds and his heart had risen by a step. This is the cosmos. This is the heavenly Tao. At this moment, Lin Feng understood. Even peak Yuan venerates could not compare with Lin Feng in their comprehension of the essence of the cosmos heavenly Tao. Even if their internal universes were much stronger than Lin Feng's, their internal universes were still internal universes, no matter how perfect they constructed them. The slightest deviation, the slightest change in details, when one became a powerful being, would be enough to create a huge gap. After comprehending the great Tao of the universe and using the super black hole and the life energy of the universe as the core, the internal universe was the real universe. My choice was not wrong. Lin Feng vaguely understood why old ancestor Taisong wanted him to take this path. The formation of the internal universe was actually a path of cultivation. If he went astray at the beginning, it would be difficult to reverse it later. However, the most important thing was that if the universe in one's body wasn't formed perfectly from the start, it was very likely that the upper limit of one's cultivation would be affected when one achieved the strength of an almighty. There might even be shackles that would cause one to be trapped in a cage. The path he walked was the most orthodox path of the universe's heavenly Tao. The path of cultivation was the purest and the most extreme. This was a truly broad path. The will of the heavenly Tao can no longer do anything to me. After enduring the influence of the first round of the will of the heavenly Tao, Lin Feng no longer had anything to fear. The will of the heavenly Tao in the darkness was enraged like a tiger in a cage. Other than roaring, it could do nothing to him. The resistance of the black hole chaotic origin heart had completely collapsed. It meant that he could transform into an origin primal chaos paragon and construct an internal universe. In his mind, the veins were extremely clear. After coming in contact with the aura of the cosmos and the profound mysteries of the heavenly Tao, Lin Feng clearly understood the operation of the cosmos and all the profound mysteries of the heavenly Tao. At the moment when he fused with the black hole chaotic origin heart, he seemed to have transformed into a supermassive Milky Way black hole. All the energy in his body surged and fused with the energy of the supermassive Milky Way black hole. With perfect control, he used his soul to form an invisible pair of hands and his fleshy body to form the boundary of the cosmos, forming a huge maelstrom within his body. Wah, that was the evolution of the black hole. It was the moment when the black hole transformed perfectly, turning into a singularity. The energy condensed into a single point before exploding. It was the collapse of the black hole. The Big Bang. Pong. At that moment, everything became silent. The newly formed supermassive black hole had already turned into a primal universe. Endless energy gathered at the center of the universe. The aura of the cosmos fused within. At this moment, it no longer belonged to the supermassive Milky Way black hole. Instead, it belonged to Lin Feng. Success. After possessing the body, Lin Feng could clearly sense the existence of the supermassive Milky Way black hole. Or more accurately, he had absorbed the supermassive Milky Way black hole into his internal universe. The universe had its own rules of operation. The universe in Lin Feng's body also had its own rules of operation, Lin Feng's own rules of operation. Other supremacies couldn't do it because their internal universes weren't perfect. They didn't have the aura of the cosmos, so naturally, they didn't have the power of life to evolve life, let alone change the rules of operation of the universe. However, Lin Feng could do it. With his mind, he could clearly sense everything about the supermassive Milky Way black hole, including every life in the Milky Way. At this moment, Lin Feng was like a god, truly in control of the entire universe. With a thought, the laws of the universe appeared. He was the will of the heavenly Tao of the universe. This is the internal universe. Lin Feng sighed. In his body, a primal universe was born. Everything was blurry, as if it was in an undeveloped state. It was chaotic, and chaotic airflows could be seen everywhere. It was like the birth of a new life. As he cultivated, the internal universe would gradually grow until it transformed a second time when he became an almighty. The supermassive Milky Way black hole didn't change much. It was just that it was no longer in the period of destruction. It was as if it had returned to the time when it was young, devouring the energy from the outside to supply itself. As long as he was alive, the supermassive Milky Way black hole would be alive. Even if he died in the future, Old Man Jiaxing had promised to protect the supermassive Milky Way black hole. It's the same for the Netherworld's secret realm. How could Lin Feng not know that the so-called Netherworld secret realm was actually a part of the Netherworld Senior's internal universe? That was why the Netherworld secret realm could evolve life and the 9-prison tribe existed. Now, he could create life in his internal universe and create a new tribe. Because his internal universe was in a perfect state, it had the aura of the cosmos and could evolve life. However, it was still too early for him. There was no need to create life immediately. To him now, other than humans, he couldn't think of any other life that was more suitable. Primordial chaos supremacy. Lin Feng smiled. After completing the first and second steps, the remaining third step would be easy to become an primordial chaos supremacy. It was like walking to the end of a road. There were no more forks in the road. He only needed to move forward steadily. His will hadn't collapsed yet, and all the conditions were met. The formation of a perfect internal universe and becoming in primordial chaos supremacy was just a matter of time. Chapter 26:37. Possession was the life aura of the universe. Even without the Milky Way super black hole, Lin Feng could still create an internal universe. As an origin chaos supremacy, his grasp and understanding of the heavenly Tao were much deeper than ordinary supremacies. The internal universe he created was also more exquisite and perfect. Of course, without the life aura of the universe, no matter how perfect an internal universe was, it would still be lacking. Furthermore, without contact with the life aura of the universe, one did not have a thorough understanding of the universe's essence. So it was impossible to create a perfect internal universe. An origin chaos supremacy was formed when a perfect internal universe was formed. Lin Feng's life level, which had always been shackled, soared with the perfect internal universe. His perfect chaotic body and perfect chaotic soul were also strengthened. The shackles of the godly master level no longer existed. After becoming a supremacy, even the most ordinary supremacy's life level would sublimate and reach the level of the universe. From then on, there would be no difference in life level. The bloodline would fuse with one's body and build an internal universe. The difference was one's grasp of the heavenly Tao and the strength of the internal universe. When a godly master becomes a supremacy, his mixed power will normally increase by 10 times. However, I have a perfect internal universe, so it should be much higher. Lin Feng was helpless. Humans were too small. No matter how perfect his internal universe was, his mixed power was still scattered in his body. It was unrealistic to increase it greatly. Every length had its own shortcoming. Close to 30 times. That's not bad. Lin Feng sensed his mixed power. It had already increased to 95 times the standard of a Venerable One. For a newly advanced Venerable One, it was already quite considerable. Only a few special life forms could have mixed power that exceeded 100 times when they had just advanced to Venerable One. Humans who could reach this value were rare in the history of the universe. And this was only Lin Feng's weakest point. After becoming a supremacy and building an internal universe, his life level would increase greatly. The upper limit of his strength would increase greatly in all aspects. It was as if he had broken the shackles and jumped out of the well. Even with the same perfect chaotic body, there were differences in strength. For example, the Ape King's perfect chaotic body was much stronger than Lin Feng's. Once he broke the shackles, his physical strength would instantly reach 1,000 times the limit of a supremacy. Although Lin Feng's perfect chaotic body was much weaker than Ape King's, the construction of his perfect internal universe was far beyond that of an ordinary venerable. Now, he had also reached 1,000 times the limit of a venerable. Moreover, Lin Feng had a perfect chaotic body due to the small size of a human body. Therefore, his control over his physical body did not drop too much due to the huge increase in his physical body. It only dropped from 10 times to 8 times. It must be known that when many peak divine masters became venerables, their control of their physical bodies would not reach the standard of a venerable. Even though Lin Feng's realm had not changed, he was still at the peak of the chaos heavenly Tao and the top-notch intent heavenly Tao. He was still far stronger than ordinary supremacies. Moreover, this was the strength of humans to begin with. It was also Lin Feng's strongest link. A perfect inner universe. Lin Feng had already glimpsed the essence of the heavenly Tao. Furthermore, he possessed the aura of the universe's life force, which made it easier for him to comprehend the subsequent realms. While other venerables could comprehend the sky laws from afar, Lin Feng possessed a complete sky law. Even though this was only the initial evolution of the universe, his comprehension of the sky laws was comparable to that of a Yuan Venerate powerhouse. This was the terror of a primordial chaos origin venerable. After becoming a venerable, one would embark on a broad path. The improvement of a venerable's strength did not rely on bloodline or talent. It relied on the comprehension of the heavenly Tao, which was the strongest aspect of a primordial chaos origin venerable. My current chaos body level is 760 million times the standard of a venerable. Lin Feng was very satisfied. Those extremely talented universe special life forms, such as primordial chaos origin venerables and perfect chaotic primordial chaos origin venerables, were comparable to experts like Huang Zun after becoming venerables. However, he had already reached the level of a primary level ultimate god. The standard of a primary level ultimate god's combat strength was 100 million to 1 billion times that of a venerable. Not only had he crossed the threshold, but he had also completely entered it. However, this is only a theoretical comparison. Lin Feng knew that strength could not be calculated in this way. A primary level ultimate god's inner universe was much stronger than his. Their comprehension of the heavenly Tao and the use of the chaos treasure were far above his. He was definitely not a primary level ultimate god's opponent in a one-on-one life and death battle. However, he had just entered the venerable realm. Once he fully stabilized, he might be able to compete with a primary level ultimate god. No wonder Senior Netherworld was almost invincible in the primal universe with his ultimate god ability. Even the cosmic god, who was comparable to an almighty in the primal universe, couldn't do anything to him. It's a pity that he still fell in the end. Lin Feng sighed. When he was seizing the life aura of the universe, he clearly felt the heavenly Tao's anger. The heavenly Tao's would not treat him any differently. It would treat him the same way it treated Senior Netherworld. However, he had already thought it through when he embarked on this path. All his worries had been resolved. He was alone and had nothing to fear. No matter how many enemies there were, he had to walk alone. He naturally had to pay some price to become the strongest. Fortunately, the heavenly Tao's will itself did not have any offensive ability. As long as he could withstand the pressure of its will, there would be no threat. If it wanted to make a move, it would have to rely on the Seventh Universe's divine inquisition. It was fun to fight with people. It was even more fun to fight with the heavenly Tao. Lin Feng's body flowed with hot blood that was unwilling to be left out. Compared to the improvement of the perfect chaos body, the improvement of my soul is truly huge. There were strong and weak talents. Humans were born with stronger souls and stronger comprehension. Lin Feng was the same. Compared to the physical body, the improvement of the soul depended more on the step of becoming a supremacy. Humans had their own shackles. For example, no matter how strong one's cultivation was at the peak of the Almighty, they could not compare to those talented soul cultivators. However, now that they had become supremacies, their bloodline and potential had been unlocked. Only the comprehension of the heavenly Tao was left. The advantages of humans began to show. The deeper one's comprehension of the heavenly Tao, the more perfect their internal universe was. Their spiritual sea was bigger when they were almighty, and it expanded even more after they advanced. This was the most extreme transformation for a one-thought supremacy. Compared to a supremacy, their physical body would be strengthened by 10 times on average. Their sea of consciousness would be expanded by at least 10 times, or even dozens of times. Some cultivators with peerless talent would even have their sea of consciousness expanded by 100 times. Lin Feng's spiritual sea was originally 57 times the standard of his supremacy. However, after completing the expansion, the 10,000 origin mustard stone and the perfect internal universe had created a new record in the universe, 62,000 times. It had increased by more than 1,000 times. As for the quality of his soul, it had directly increased by 1,000 times the limit of his supremacy. If his physical body could achieve this, his soul would naturally be easier. If not for the heavenly Tao's shackles, it would be far stronger. His current spiritual sea was a truly majestic heavenly Tao ocean. Due to the infinite vastness of his spiritual sea, even his soul control, which should have decreased due to the improvement of his soul quality, had increased slightly. It had increased from 10 times to 16 times. The soul power multiplier had reached a shocking 996 million times. It had exceeded the physical body's mixed power multiplier and almost reached the 1 billion threshold of a mid-level ultimate god. Chapter 2638. With such a sea of consciousness and the protection of the 10,000 origin mustard stone, I'm not afraid of any soul attacks at all. Lin Feng's mind was immersed in the vast sea of consciousness. The drops of water in the sea of consciousness were crystal clear and contained the mysteries of heavenly way. The water in the sea of consciousness wrapped around the perfect chaotic soul like a mother protecting her child. Now that his soul strength had improved to the extreme, Lin Feng was more confident. Although his close combat ability was not as good as an ultimate god expert, his soul was different. The vast sea of consciousness was an endless source of energy that could both defend and attack. Although he might not be able to break through an ultimate god expert who also cultivated the Tao of soul, what if the opponent was an ultimate god expert who cultivated the physical body? Soul attacks were direct and simple and did not require too complicated soul control. Even if he could not kill the opponent, he could still severely injure them. With his vast sea of consciousness, his soul recovery speed must be extremely fast. His close combat ability was close to a primary level ultimate god. His soul attack was comparable to a primary level ultimate god. Becoming a primordial chaos venerable did not disappoint Lin Feng. He now only had the strength of a newly promoted primordial chaos venerable and still had a lot of room for improvement. Even if he had to face the 7th universe's divine inquisition in the future, he would no longer be afraid. You have to pay for what you gain. There are no more peaceful days of cultivation. Lin Feng smiled slightly. Now that the Heavenly Way's divine inquisition knew that the 7th universe's divine inquisition would come at any time. The universe was so big that it was under the surveillance of the Heavenly Way's divine inquisition. Even if he was in the black domain, he could not hide. As for the universe's secret realm, it was no different from the black domain. There is only one place where the Heavenly Way's divine inquisition could not descend. The Death-Blind Zone, the Supreme God Realm battlefield. Lin Feng's eyes were bright and full of fighting spirit. That was the purgatory and furnace of the Venerables. Entering the Supreme God Realm battlefield was endless killing. Even the 5 great leaders were no exception. Legend said that it was a battlefield created by several almighties working together. Legend said that there was a suppression that surpassed the supreme chaos treasure. Legend said that there was a transcendent existence that even the Heavenly Way's divine inquisition feared. However, no one knew if it was true or not. The Supreme God Realm battlefield was easy to enter, but difficult to leave. There was absolute fairness there. Identity, status, background, and so on had no effect on the battlefield of the divine world. In the battlefield of the divine world, everything depended on strength. If you were strong enough, you would be able to obtain a high enough status and enough treasures. In the universe, if a venerate hadn't entered the battlefield of the Supreme God Realm, he wouldn't live up to his name even if he became a Yuan venerate powerhouse. When the time comes, I'll be waiting for you at the 7th battlefield. Lin Feng was not the least bit afraid of Universe 7's godly inquisition. The path of the strongest was destined to be filled with thorns and blood. Who was the hunter and who was the prey was still unknown. Without spending too much time, Lin Feng quickly set off and returned to the Yellow Spring secret realm. The consolidation and promotion of his strength was not urgent for the time being. He also did not know when Universe 7's godly inquisition would arrive. Taking advantage of the fact that he was still safe and sound, he had to do everything that needed to be done. He completed the trade with Qi Yixin. Although Lin Feng no longer needed the universal spring of life, he still had to fulfill his promise. Moreover, this was only a small sum. Thus, Lin Feng entered the burial ground of the Ian God and headed straight to the ninth abyss of primal chaos, where the Huangyu tribe was located. Previously, it took a lot of effort to enter, but now, it saved a lot of effort. Follow me. Huangyu stroked his long white beard with a kind smile on his face. Obviously, he was not worried about Lin Feng successfully becoming an Origin Chaos Venerable. Even the cautious Huang Zhou was the same, as if he already knew the result. This was because they knew that the greatest danger to becoming an Origin Chaos Venerable came from the universe's will of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, Father God Yellow Spring left behind a treasure like Emperor Qin's Origin Heart. If the successor could successfully refine Emperor Qin's Origin Heart, he would naturally become an Origin Chaos Venerable. Of the two, refining Emperor Qin's Origin Heart was more difficult. Lin Feng had already refined Emperor Qin's Origin Heart and became an Origin Chaos Venerable. What was there to worry about? Yes, Senior. Lin Feng respected Huang Yu and Huang Zhou from the bottom of his heart. With the ability of a supreme god, they had endured loneliness for tens of thousands of eras and guarded the road to Yellow Spring. Just this character alone was enough to make people respect them. They were all new lives created by Senior Yellow Springs. Because they were born in the internal universe, there was a limit to how much their strength could increase. It was impossible for them to exceed the internal universe, which was the cultivation base of Father God Yellow Spring. However, by relying on Yellow Spring's will of the heavenly Tao, they could unleash strength that exceeded their own level, just like how the universe's will of the heavenly Tao enhanced them. Therefore, the skeletons of the Ian God seen in the Huang family tribe had been killed by them. In Huang Yu's tribe, the bodies of the Ian gods were eternal and indestructible. Lin Feng saw as many as 5 of them, which proved that Yellow Spring had killed a total of 5 Ian gods. Each of them had been bestowed with the power of the heavenly Tao and had a fighting strength comparable to a peak Yuan venerate. One day, I will be like that too. Lin Feng followed Huang Yu into the huge golden tower. There was an Ian god's body on every step, as if they were spoils of war. However, the owner of these spoils had already perished. The 6th level of the tower was already empty. Thud! Huang Yu stopped in his tracks, looked at the empty space, and laughed involuntarily. Actually, there were originally many treasures here. They were all primal chaos treasures obtained by Father God. There were all kinds of treasures here. Lin Feng nodded. This level had originally been like a treasure trove, but it had now been emptied. Huang Yu smiled bitterly and didn't continue speaking. However, Lin Feng also knew where these treasures had gone. The entire Yellow Spring secret realm was under the control of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. The burial ground of the Ian gods was no exception. Even the Yellow Spring path was under the control of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. It was very likely that Patriarch Supreme Poverty had made a similar promise to Senior Yellow Spring to protect the last trace of inheritance for him. As for the other treasures, they had already taken what they could. For example, the 7th Mercenary Alliance had also taken a lot of the Qin Emperor Origin beads and Qin Emperor Origin crystals outside. They hadn't taken all of them because they were suitable for the 9 prison race and because ordinary venerates couldn't use these treasures. However, the spoils of war that Senior Yellow Spring had seized belonged to the Ian gods. The primal chaos treasures venerates could naturally use them. It was also possible that they had been returned to the 7th Mercenary Alliance. As for the specifics, it was unknown. Go, Father God is waiting for you. Huang Yu's gaze swept over and landed on Lin Feng. He revealed a gratified smile. After waiting for tens of thousands of eras, there is finally a perfect result. I believe Father God will be very happy to see you. With his hands behind his back, Huang Yu's gaze moved away from Lin Feng. Lin Feng gently nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He walked past Huang Yu and walked up the stairs. Greetings to Senior Yellow Spring. Chapter 2639. The top floor of the steeple was surrounded by clouds. This was the tallest building in the Huang Yu tribe. No cultivator had ever set foot on this floor, including the 7th Mercenary Alliance's supremacies. Before becoming a primordial chaos supremacy, Lin Feng had been to this steeple before, but he had never entered the 7th floor. This was an absolute forbidden zone, an unknown space, an unknown territory. This was a very special place in the road to the netherworld, just like a secret realm. It was independent of the road to the netherworld and the entire universe. As soon as he stepped in, Lin Feng felt its uniqueness. This should be the core of the universe in Senior Netherworld's body. You're here. A powerful voice echoed in the hall of the steeple. In the misty clouds, a figure stood quietly like an illusion, but it was so real. A body that was dozens of meters tall, with greenish-black skin that seemed to have the laws of the universe flowing around it. His pitch-black eyes were like two small black holes, filled with a strong, devouring power. He had a pair of giant bull horns on his head, and the spiral horns on his forehead were exuding an oppressive power. He was very similar to the Nine Prison Clan, but whether it was his aura or life force, they were not on the same level. He just stood there as if he was the master of this world, controlling everything. Although it was just a virtual image, Lin Feng did not doubt that he would fall forever with just a thought. Netherworld. The master of the Netherworld secret realm, a legendary expert. Lin Feng greets Senior. Lin Feng stood respectfully. Senior Netherworld in front of him was truly an invincible existence in the original universe. Even Almighties could not do anything to him, even if he was only an ultimate god. His leisurely laughter was like the gently rolling waves in the ocean. Lin Feng was a small boat in the waves. After billions of years of waiting, I didn't expect a human to come. Huang Quan had a smile on her face like a benevolent elder. She looked Lin Feng up and down. Child, what made you choose this path? Lin Feng raised his head and met Huang Quan's eyes. At that moment, it was as if he was looking at the heavenly Tao of the universe. Why did he set foot on this path? Because of curiosity? Or was it because he was too poor? None of them. I want to become the strongest. Lin Feng's eyes shone with brilliance as he spoke without hesitation. There might be countless reasons to become an origin primal chaos supremacy, but this was the only one that truly moved him. Since there was a possibility of becoming a universe supreme master, why not give it a try? Lin Feng clearly knew that if he gave up, he would definitely regret it in the future. Perhaps this path was full of thorns, and there was only a slim chance of survival. Even Senior Netherworld, who stunned the entire universe, had fallen on this bumpy and rugged path. But as long as there was a chance, he would continue walking. All right. Yellow Springs seemed to be very satisfied with this answer. The lingering clouds began to fluctuate slightly. In an instant, a moon-red bead appeared. It seemed to have a life of its own as it emitted a sparkling luster. This is a universe true treasure that I obtained in the 100 million rounds of Origin World. It's called the Neon Zero Sky Bead. What you see is the soul consciousness that I left in the Neon Zero Sky Bead. Now, I'll leave it with you. Even great beings won't be able to detect your aura if they don't use their minds. It'll give you an extra life-saving ability in the battle against Universe 7's Godly Inquisition. The Neon Zero Sky Bead seemed to have a life of its own as it fell into Lin Feng's hand. Lin Feng felt the unique aura of the Neon Zero Sky Bead. It was obviously not a Chaos True Treasure from the universe because it didn't have any Chaos aura. But the power it contained was much stronger than all the Chaos True Treasures he had seen before. A treasure that could hide one's aura. Even great beings couldn't detect it easily. Thank you, Senior. Lin Feng thanked him. This was exactly what he needed. Although he had already decided to enter the Supreme God World battlefield, he couldn't just stay there forever. Besides, even in the Supreme God World battlefield, he might not be safe. Universe 7's Godly Inquisition was the strongest force in the universe. With the will of the heavenly path behind them, even the 5 giants couldn't compare. The spiral horn on Yellow Spring's forehead flashed with light. He smiled and said, "This is an ordinary supreme treasure of the universe, but it has a special effect. For now, it is of little use to you. It is far inferior to the Qin Emperor's origin heart that you have refined." Lin Feng nodded. The Qin Emperor's origin heart was too powerful. Its defensive ability alone could withstand the pressure of the will of the heavenly path at the peak of the heavenly path. This is an ancient inheritance that I obtained by chance. Unfortunately, I couldn't really refine the Qin Emperor's origin heart at that time, and couldn't touch the inheritance. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been afraid of Universe 7's Godly Inquisition. Nether shook his head as if he felt a little regretful. I traveled the universe and obtained many treasures. But even if all of them were added together, they were far less than the 5 pieces of the Qin Emperor's set. The 5 pieces could be used separately, and they were all supreme universe true treasures. Once combined, they would become Hongming's origin object. Unfortunately, after I fell, only the Qin Emperor's origin heart was left. Lin Feng looked at Nether. He could feel the loneliness in Nether's heart, like a hero past his prime. There was no resentment, only a little regret. Fate made fools of people. "Senior, how should I find the other 4 pieces?" Lin Feng asked. Nether said slowly, "They should be in the hands of Tai Qiong, Ao Kong, and Qing Zhu. The Qin Emperor's origin heart is the main part of the set. After refining it, you can sense the location of the other pieces. This set is very suitable for the Origin Chaos Venerable, and the ancient inheritance needs all 5 pieces to be opened. Remember, you must find it. Ancient inheritance. This wasn't an inheritance from the original universe, but an ancient inheritance from outside the universe. Even Nether valued it so much." Lin Feng nodded. Even if it wasn't for the ancient inheritance, it was suitable for the Origin Chaos Venerable, an existence that surpassed the Chaos true treasures. He would do his best to get it. "Senior, do you have any unfulfilled wishes?" Lin Feng looked at Nether's body. After he took the Nether Heavenly Pearl, it gradually began to fade, as if it was about to disappear. Lin Feng thought of what Nether had said before and understood. The Nether before him was just a wisp of soul consciousness left in the Nether Heavenly Pearl. Now that he had given the Nether Heavenly Pearl to him, it would naturally disappear. "Ha!" Nether laughed leisurely, as if it contained endless emotions. All the grievances in the past seemed to have been wiped away, and he no longer had any nostalgia for the path he had walked. There was only calmness and composure left in his eyes. "Take care of the 9 prison tribe for me." Nether's voice sounded softly, and his figure faded, disappearing into the clouds. Lin Feng looked at the disappearing figure and bowed slightly to show his respect. "Yes, Senior." Chapter 2640. What he couldn't let go of the most was his family. Lin Feng could feel the tenderness of Senior Netherworld. Just like himself, he couldn't let go of Earth, Huaxia, and his family. To Senior Netherworld, the 9 prison clan was his children, other than Huang Yu and Huang Zhou, who were formed from his blood essence. The rest of them were his descendants. However, every elite of the 9 prison tribe still had his bloodline. Lin Feng stayed on the 7th floor of the spire for a long time. Although he had only met Senior Netherworld once, and had only spoken a few words, it felt like they had known each other for a long time. He could become an Origin Chaos Venerable because of Senior Netherworld's guidance. The 9 prison abyss and the Qin Emperor Yuan Xin had cleared all the obstacles for him to become an Origin Chaos Venerable. Senior Netherworld was both a teacher and a friend. "Don't worry, Senior. As long as I have the ability, I will protect the 9 prison clan for you and give them a real Netherworld secret realm in the future." There were some things that he could guess even if Senior Netherworld didn't say. Senior Netherworld, who was almost invincible in the original universe, had even killed 5 of the strongest universe god in the Inquisition of Universe 7. The one who could kill him must be an almighty. Taichung, Aokong, and Ancestor Qing. Lin Feng sighed. Among 3 of the 5 magnates, Patriarch Taichung might even be his future teacher, but he had no idea what his intentions were. Senior Netherworld had already refined the Qin Emperor's suit, and the other parts were with the 3 giants. It was easy to imagine how Senior Netherworld died. However, this matter had been buried for hundreds of millions of years. Even Senior Netherworld had let it go, so he wouldn't do anything unnecessary. He and Senior Netherworld had met by chance, and he didn't know the details of what happened that day. Even if Senior Netherworld had a grudge against the Inquisition of Universe 7, it couldn't be said that the Inquisition of Universe 7 was wrong. From the perspective of the will of the heavenly path, what he did was understandable. When Universe 7's godly Inquisition hunted him down, it was only because of a conflict of interest between them, and because they stood from different perspectives. Let's go see Senior Netherworld. Lin Feng wouldn't forget Senior Netherworld's promise that Senior Netherworld would take him as a disciple as long as he became an Origin Chaos Venerable. An Almighty wouldn't lie. Moreover, he was still a member of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. I wonder what the Patriarch will say. Lin Feng was also curious. What would the 7th Mercenary Alliance do after he became the disciple of old Ancestor Taisong? Was there any room for coexistence with Universe 7's godly Inquisition? Yes, of course. No, it doesn't matter. Lin Feng had nothing to worry about now. His internal universe had already fused with the Milky Way super black hole. He was now free and no longer had any misgivings. At most, he would just enter the Supreme God world. Now that he had the Neon Zero Heavenly Pearl to protect him, he would have a better chance of survival. Moreover, his combat strength was comparable to a primary level ultimate god. Only with strength could one have confidence. Returning to the 6th floor of the steeple, Huang Yu stood there quietly like a doorman. His long white beard hid the endless years, and his eyes were filled with longing. When he saw Lin Feng come down, his weathered eyes suddenly flashed. "Have you seen Father?" Huang Yu asked. Lin Feng nodded. "Yes." "Did Father say anything?" Huang Yu was a little impatient. Lin Feng looked at Huang Yu and slowly said, "He asked me to take care of the 9 prison clan for him." "Father." 2 lines of clear tears burst out of Huang Yu's eyes when he heard that. He could no longer control his emotions and fell to the ground, crying like a child. His long white beard was stained with hot tears. At that moment, Huang Yu poured out all the longing that he had for thousands of years. Lin Feng stepped aside and did not disturb him. Huang Yu was the first son of the Netherworld. He was also the one who had spent the most effort to cultivate him and had the deepest feelings for him. Him coming down proved that the Netherworld had completely fallen. The endless longing accumulated in Huang Yu's heart was like a landslide at that moment. After all, he was a living being and had strong emotions. His crying lasted for a long time. Lin Feng stood quietly beside Huang Yu. "How is Father?" Huang Yu's voice was a little hoarse. Lin Feng nodded. "He has already let it go." "Is that so?" Huang Yu murmured and shook his head with a bitter smile. "Even Father has let it go. What are we still holding on to? Time is empty and everything is lost. Father is wise, and we can't compare to him." "Yes," Lin Feng said to Huang Yu, "I should go too. We might not see each other for a long time." Huang Yu nodded. He knew Lin Feng's plan. "Let's go back to the tribe first. Second brother has already prepared the things," Huang Yu said. "Oh," Lin Feng replied. They left the spire. Lin Feng followed Huang Yu back to the 9th abyss of chaos. At that moment, the 9-prison baleful qi had already dissipated. Without the Qin Emperor's origin heart, the 9-prison baleful qi had lost its source. It disappeared and would not appear again. Oh, Lin Feng felt something in his heart. It came from the Qin Emperor's origin heart that he had refined. His heartbeat quickened as though it was a bloodline call. He couldn't wait. Senior Yellow Springs is right. Even if I don't deliberately search for it, I can still sense it when I'm close. Lin Feng now understood what Huang Yu had said about Huang Zhou's preparations. They entered the tribe. The two tribes were together in the ninth abyss of chaos. As soon as they entered, the feeling of being moved intensified. It was as though there was a pair of invisible hands holding them together. Lin Feng saw Huang Zhou with a solemn expression. Behind him was a group of 9 prison war venerables. In Huang Zhou's hands were the 2 treasures he had seen in the Huang family tribe, the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and Qin Emperor's origin crystal. One was the core of the Yellow Springs pool. The other was the guardian treasure of the Yin Yang Mountain. The difference was that the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and Qin Emperor's origin crystal were complete. Although they weren't all 108, they had formed a hole with a gap. 2 supreme treasures of the chaos. Although they weren't complete, they were the real deal. In comparison, there were more Qin Emperor's origin pearls, nearly half of them, and less than 1/3 of the Qin Emperor's origin crystal. These are the instructions of Father. Huang Zhou handed the 2 supreme treasures to Lin Feng. One day, if a cultivator refines the Qin Emperor's origin heart and becomes an origin chaos supremacy, give them the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and Qin Emperor's origin crystal. Huang Zhou's expression was solemn. He glanced at Huang Yu and then at Lin Feng. I hope you won't disappoint, Father. Okay. Lin Feng didn't hesitate. He indeed needed the Qin Emperor's origin pearl and Qin Emperor's origin crystal. The rest should be in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. He could ask Patriarch Taisong when the time came. Just as Senior Yellow Springs said, if he could refine them, his strength would increase greatly. After bidding farewell to Huang Yu and Huang Zhou, Lin Feng left the Yellow Springs path. Chapter 26:41. The Sky Path Secret Realm was the most ancient secret realm in the universe. Legend had it that this was an ancient secret realm that was born along with the universe when the primal chaos was first created. It contained endless heavenly Tao and still preserved the heavenly Tao operation when the primal chaos was first created. This was not only the most ancient and powerful secret realm in the universe, but it was also the stronghold of a huge force in the universe. Universe 7's Divine Inquisition. Few people knew that Universe 7's Godly Inquisition was in a semi-secluded state. It was an independent organization that didn't fight for fame and fortune, nor did it fight for power. Even many emperors and paragons didn't know about the existence of Universe 7's Godly Inquisition. However, the venerables who were at the core of the 5 giants and above knew about it. The Divine Inquisition of Universe 7 existed to protect the operation of the heavenly Tao nomological laws and maintain the balance of the universe. They were protected by the universe's heavenly Tao and were like the personal guards of the heavenly Tao. They carried out every mission meticulously. They didn't rely on the outside world or participate in the myriad realms. They were detached from the universe. The Divine Inquisition of Universe 7 had 1,018 inheritance pearls. 18 of them were Eternity God Inheritance Pearls and 1,000 Eternity God Inheritance Pearls. After receiving the inheritance and cultivating it to the extreme, one could obtain the favor of the heavenly Tao and be bestowed with the position of Eternity God. Ordinary Eternity Gods were bestowed with the favor of the heavenly Tao and had combat strength comparable to peak Ultimate Gods. Eternity Gods were bestowed with the favor of the heavenly Tao and had combat strength comparable to peak Yuan Venerables. Although one's strength would forever be shackled after obtaining the inheritance, there were too few people in the vast universe who could really resist this temptation. Eternal Peak Ultimate Gods and Eternal Peak Yuan Venerables. After obtaining the position of inheritance, one would have the same lifespan as the original universe as long as one didn't die. Eternity Gods were blessed by the heavenly Tao and were almost invincible in the original universe. They could contend against almighties. Of course, this was excluding heaven-defying cultivators like Huang Quan. However, how many Huang Quan were there in the endless epics of the universe? Divine Inquisition. This was one of the 3 divisions of the Divine Inquisition of Universe 7. It was mainly responsible for the Divine Inquisition, which was the law enforcer in the secular world. It was led by one of the three main eternity gods, Sheng-Jin, eternity god. Under him were Kuan, eternity god, barbarian dragon, eternity god, Yin-Yang, eternity god, prison eternity god, and eternity god eternity. Primal chaos venerable. It's primal chaos venerable again. The sacred gold universe god was originally a piece of sacred gold that was born in a universe secret realm. Through the evolution of the universe's primal chaos, it opened its spiritual consciousness and coincidentally absorbed the blood of 10,000 universes. Since then, it had undergone a perfect transformation. He obtained the inheritance and became one of the 20,000 divine adjudicators. After that, he even stood out and gained the favor of the will of the heavenly Tao. He obtained the pearl of eternity, divine inheritance, and became the god of eternity. Even though they were all eternal gods, there were differences in strength. Without a doubt, of the 6 eternal gods of the divine judgment great land, the strongest was eternal god Sheng-Jin. Thus, he was the commander and was in charge of managing the land. Crack! Sheng-Jin, great eternity god, placed a piece of universal saint metal into his mouth and chewed on it. This universal saint metal that even supremacies found hard to destroy was like tofu in front of Sheng-Jin, great eternity god. At this time, eternal god Sheng-Jin's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and the will of the heavenly Tao exuded a boundless pressure. Below him, Kuan Yi, great Eon god, had a solemn expression. He had followed Sheng-Jin, great Eon god, for eons and was one of the oldest of the 5 great Eon gods. He had rarely seen Sheng-Jin, great Eon god, like this. A million eras. Even now, those 2 bastards, Hope and Forever, have used me as a joke. Sheng-Jin, great Eon god, naturally wouldn't forget the unforgettable humiliation he had suffered eons ago. After obtaining information from the will of the heavenly Tao, he killed an origin chaos supremacy named Yellow Spring. At first, he didn't care too much about it. What was there to fear from a mere supremacy? Wouldn't it be a joke for a dignified eternal god to deal with a supremacy? He sent several divine adjudicators to lead a team of adjudicators to eliminate Yellow Spring. Sheng-Jin, great Eon god himself, also needed to cultivate. Although he couldn't increase his strength after obtaining the inheritance and couldn't become an almighty, his combat strength could still be strengthened. For example, he could increase his realm, use his strength, and use of treasures. There was also competition between the eternal gods. Of the 6 eternal gods of the divine judgment great land, whoever was stronger could become the boss and govern the divine judgment great land. Besides the divine judgment great land, there were also 2 divisions of the universe primal chaos and the heavenly Tao samsara. Each had an eternal god that stood at the top of the 18 eternal gods. But who would have thought that the divine adjudicators and adjudicators he sent would all be killed by Yellow Spring, one batch after another, until even the eternal gods he sent were killed by Yellow Spring. Only then did Sheng-Jin, great Eon god, start to pay attention to this matter. But at that time, Yellow Spring had already hidden in the battlefield of the supreme god world where the almighty Buddha Heart Shura and Killing Heart Guanyin were. Hongming's source item was guarding this place, so the will of the heavenly Tao couldn't descend. After that, the situation went out of control and was difficult to salvage. Not only was the will of the heavenly Tao furious, but also alarmed eternal god Hope and eternal god Eternal. The 3 eternal gods acted together and even made a deal with the 3 cultivators of the original universe. Only then did they manage to clean up the mess. That battle was the greatest shame of Sheng-Jin, great Eon god's life. The other 5 eternal gods of the divine judgment great land under his jurisdiction were all killed by Yellow Spring. The eternal gods and divine adjudicators suffered even more casualties. Corpses littered the ground, and their vitality was greatly damaged. Although Sheng-Jin, great Eon god, had the inheritance pearl and the complete inheritance ladder, it wasn't difficult to make up for the eternal gods of the divine judgment great land. However, That battle had deeply nailed Shinjin Great Ian God to the pillar of shame, making him a laughingstock for tens of thousands of years. The Kuan Yi Great Ian God, Barbarian Dragon Great Ian God, Yin Yang Great Ian God, Prison Breaker Great Ian God, and Black Flame Great Ian God were all reselected from the 20,000 divine adjudicators after that battle. The will of the heavenly Tao had given the inheritance pearl to the eternal God. Therefore, even the Kuan Yi Great Ian God and Barbarian Dragon Great Ian God, who had the most seniority, had only followed him for tens of thousands of years. This time, I definitely won't raise a tiger and invite calamity. Shengjin Great Ian God's eyes shone with an extremely cold light. It was as if two rays of light were shooting toward the Kuan Yi Great Ian God below. Hua! The Kuan Yi Great Ian God instantly received Shengjin Great Ian God's thoughts and orders. Yes, my lord. Bowing slightly, the Kuan Yi Grand Eternity God revealed his shark-like teeth and let out a smile that made one's heart tremble. His four thick arms made cracking sounds as his figure disappeared from the main hall. Divine Adjudicator, a little fellow who had just entered the sovereign realm? This mission was too simple. The seventh God realm, Taicheon God realm. In the middle of the vast and boundless land stood a giant statue of a bare-chested man. He was bold and unrestrained, and he held a large blade filled with killing intent. It was the founder of the Seventh Mercenary Alliance, Patriarch Taicheon. After meeting his teacher, Patriarch Anqing, Lin Feng came here. This wasn't just an ordinary statue. Chapter 2642. The last time Lin Feng came here, he didn't feel anything special. But this time, the feeling was completely different. No wonder there were many supremacies around the statue. They weren't just admiring ancestral Patriarch Taicheon. It was the ancestral Patriarch's incarnation. As a grand cultivator who had transcended the universe and the heavenly Tao, the incarnation of ancestral Patriarch Taicheon contained the complete heavenly Tao. He could feel it too, and it was clearer than the other supremacies. It was a huge heavenly Tao. It was intricate and complicated. Every single detail required a supremacy to spend an enormous amount of energy and countless epochs to comprehend. Patriarch Taicheon's mental incarnation was like a piece of art. It was too difficult to learn how it was made from this piece of art. Although it's huge and delicate, but it's not as good as my internal universe. Lin Feng had a very clear feeling. Although ancestor Taicheon's way of heaven was like a towering tree that covered the sky and the sun, and the universe in his body was only a budding sapling that was on the verge of collapse, he could feel the endless potential of the sapling. When it grew up, it would definitely be more majestic and taller than the towering tree. Thud! Lin Feng approached ancestral Patriarch Taicheon's statue. This immediately attracted the attention of some supremacies, who were a little confused. As Lin Feng gradually approached and stepped on the stairs, the supremacies couldn't help but frown and look unhappy. That was ancestral Patriarch Taicheon, the founder of the Seventh Mercenary Alliance, a grand cultivator who transcended the universe. How could a supremacy be so disrespectful to his elders and get so close to the ancestral Patriarch statue? A blue-eyed demon supremacy shouted angrily, "Come down." Another demon supremacy said coldly, "Kid, don't be ignorant of the rules." But Lin Feng turned a deaf ear to it and still stepped on the stairs. His teacher, Divine Master Anqing, had told him that he had to directly touch the incarnation of the ancestral Patriarch. As for the supremacies, there was nothing to explain to them. Should he tell them that he wanted to talk to ancestral Patriarch Taicheon? Thud! Lin Feng stood on the stairs. At this moment, he was very close to ancestral Patriarch Taicheon's statue and could easily touch it. "How dare you!" A furious shout sounded, and it came from Huang Zun's expert. His disheveled hair stood up like needles, and his eyes revealed fury. How could he allow a little supreme expert to act so impudently and blaspheme the old ancestor statue? Even if they were to pay their respects, they should do so from below and not from the top of the stairs. This was the most basic rule. The Huangzhun powerhouse's arm suddenly extended, directly grabbing at Lin Feng, who was already standing on the stairs. When the other venerables saw the Huangzhun powerhouse making a move, they quietly watched. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in the eyes of Ancestor Taichung's statue. Chi! Around the stairs around the statue, there was an invisible barrier that separated Lin Feng from the outside world. Huangzhun's arm bounced back as if it had touched a wall. What? The Huangzhun expert was dumbfounded. The other venerables who were watching also widened their eyes in shock. They had been here for at least a few eras, and some had been here for thousands of eras, but they had never seen such a phenomenon. Although they had heard of it, this was the first time they had seen it with their own eyes. The ancestral patriarch had appeared. What's going on? The ancestral patriarch has really appeared. Teacher didn't lie to me. This really isn't just a statue, but the ancestral patriarch's consciousness incarnation. The venerables immediately knelt on the ground to show their respect. However, they were more curious about the origin of the little human who had just gone up. Why did he provoke the ancestral patriarch's statue to appear? It was chaos. The moment Lin Feng touched ancestral patriarch Taichung's statue, he seemed to have been sucked into the endless void. There was nothing around him, and the universe's heavenly Tao had disappeared, replaced by another universe. The heavenly Tao here was not as complete as the original universe, but it was in a very stable state and could not be broken. Ancestral Patriarch Taichung's internal universe. Lin Feng, who had been in contact with the life aura of a universe and understood the essence of a universe, knew very well that this stable universe was obviously Ancestral Patriarch Taichung's internal universe. Almighties were beyond the universe. This was because their internal universes had already formed into a real universe. Whoosh! A faint light appeared in front of Lin Feng's eyes. It was like a ray of light in the sky. It enlarged, and suddenly, a heroic man appeared. He had a head full of hair and beard like a savage. The bones and muscles of his naked upper body gave off a perfect and natural feeling, as if he was created by heaven and earth. His eyes flashed with a wild light, and his gaze seemed to be able to see through Lin Feng. Just by standing there, he made people feel a sense of reverence. There was no pressure, and there were no restrictions. He was like a villager in the mountains, but he had the aura of a king, making people worship him uncontrollably. Ancestral Patriarch Taichung. Lin Feng greets Senior. Lin Feng bowed and said respectfully. The heroic and unruly man in front of him was 90% similar to Ancestral Patriarch Taichung's statue. His identity was self-evident. Ha ha, you're still calling me Senior? Ancestral Patriarch Taichung laughed boldly, and his wild eyes revealed a bit of love for talent. Am I not a man of few words in your heart? Lin Feng smiled. Then he knelt on one knee and cupped his hands. Disciple Lin Feng greets Master. Kowtow. Ancestral Patriarch Taichung smiled with satisfaction. Lin Feng obeyed. The ceremony of apprenticeship couldn't be ignored. Although it was only a few words, he could feel that Ancestral Patriarch Taichung was sincere in accepting him as a disciple. He should cherish such an opportunity. It was very normal for a cultivator to have a few teachers, and there was no need to overstep their boundaries. Good. Since you've bowed, you'll be my third disciple. I've already informed your eldest senior brother and second senior brother. After you leave here, I'll arrange everything for you. Don't worry. Lin Feng nodded. Ancestral Patriarch Taichung had only accepted 2 disciples. His eldest disciple was Yuan Venerate Fu Fuge, who commanded the entire 7th Mercenary Alliance. The second disciple was Yuan Venerate Fu Fugue, who had established Ancestral Patriarch's faction and wanted to compete with Yuan Venerate Fu Fugue. Now, he was the third disciple of Ancestral Patriarch Taichung. I'm currently deep in the Hongmeng Sea and can't return for the time being. I've already instructed Fu Fugue to temporarily guide your cultivation. Ancestral Patriarch Taichung grinned, and a tiger-headed broadsword appeared in his hand. Its shape was terrifying, just like the one on the statue. However, That child Fu Fugue's comprehension of the heavenly Tao is only SOSO. His saber technique is really not that good. Ancestral patriarch Taichung looked disgusted. Lin Feng also smiled bitterly. Yuan Venerate Fu Fugue, a dignified and unrivaled Yuan Venerate, had been called worthless by ancestral patriarch Taichung. Therefore, I still have to personally teach you this saber technique, my disciple. Ancestral patriarch Taichung raised his broadsword, and his original temperament changed instantly. At this moment, the majestic aura of an almighty was truly revealed. Chapter 26:43. This saber technique is called Taiqiangjian. There are 7 moves in total. It's my life's work. Watch carefully, my disciple. The moment he finished speaking, Patriarch Taichung had already performed it. That wild and unrestrained figure merged perfectly with the whole world. Every time the saber technique landed, it would cause the universe to resonate and the world to shake. The moment he used it, Lin Feng felt as if he had been enlightened. It was like touching the life aura of the universe and seeing the essence of the universe. It was like walking on the path of saber technique cultivation. It used to be blurry, but now he could see the end. Maybe it wasn't the real end, but at least it was far beyond his current realm. Lin Feng knew that even if he became a mighty one in the future, he might not be able to surpass Patriarch Taichung's saber technique. Of course, he couldn't really cultivate the Taiqiangjian saber technique. After all, it was far beyond his current realm. It was too profound. However, his teacher didn't want him to cultivate it. Every move of the Taiqiangjian contained a complete heavenly Tao of saber. It was a direction, a straight path. His teacher wanted him to comprehend the essence of the saber technique, and then create the saber technique that was most suitable for him. Only the saber technique he created could truly unleash his power. Ha ha! Grand Ancestor Taichung laughed heartily as he sheathed his saber. At this moment, Lin Feng was completely awake. He was completely immersed in the essence of that boundless and wondrous saber technique. That instant of comprehension felt like tens of thousands of years. A dream like 10,000 years. Teacher, how long did I comprehend it? Lin Feng was a little confused. How long? Patriarch Taichung laughed heartily. If you can comprehend it for 10,000 eras, it'll be 10,000 eras. If you can comprehend it for an instant, it'll be an instant. Lin Feng immediately understood. He had forgotten that he was now in Patriarch Taichung's internal universe. Here, his teacher was in charge of time. 10,000 eras were just an instant. How much did you comprehend? Patriarch Taichung smiled. Less than 1/10,000th, Lin Feng answered. Patriarch Taichung laughed. Not bad. Your saber technique aptitude is comparable to that of poverty. Lin Feng was stunned. You call this not bad? Ancestor Taichung looked at Lin Feng and said, back then, Fu spent 10 times more time comprehending the Taichung views than you did, but his comprehension was less than 1/10 of yours. That's why I didn't let him major in the way of the blade. Of course, even so, Fu Li's current saber technique realm is still beyond your reach. Disciple understands. Lin Feng knew that his teacher was too poor because he didn't want him to have any disrespect towards his eldest senior brother. Even if his eldest senior brother's talent with the saber was ordinary, he was still an invincible Yuan Venerate. He had followed his teacher for countless years, and his understanding of the saber was far from what Luo Yunyang could compare to. Aptitude and talent didn't represent everything. Perseverance was also a very strong ability. Your second senior brother's aptitude for the poverty saber art is not bad, but he lacks patience and research. His comprehension speed is above yours, but his comprehension of the saber art is not as good as yours. Grand Ancestor Taichung said, but poverty's attainment in bladesmanship is better than wealth's. If you have any questions in the future, you can ask him for advice. Yes, teacher. Lin Feng listened humbly. Grand Ancestor Taichung nodded his head in satisfaction. Sui'er's finger tapped gently, and like a meteor falling from the sky, it entered Luo Yunyang's forehead. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. Instantly, he felt 7 rainbow-like balls of light appear in his mind. When he thought about it, he realized that it was the Tai Chiong saber technique that Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong had just executed. Remember to study it well in the future. Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong smiled. Thank you, teacher. Lin Feng could sense that even Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong had expended a lot of energy to imprint these 7 saber techniques into his mind. Furthermore, his teacher had just said that he was deep in the Hongmeng Sea, which seemed to be dangerous. In the Yellow Spring secret realm, Luo Yunyang had also learned that there were higher-level existences outside the universe. For example, the Qin Emperor Set came from the Great Desolate Sky, and the Neon Zero Sky Pearl came from the 100 Million Wheel Origin Realm. However, it was still too early for him to know about these things. Even if he knew about them, they wouldn't be of much use. At the very least, he would have to wait until he was as strong as Senior Yellow Spring. When he was strong enough, he would naturally know what he needed to know. Do you know why I accepted you as my disciple? Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong suddenly changed the topic. The serious expression on his face was completely different from his previous appearance. Because of Senior Nether? Lin Feng had already guessed that Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong's condition for accepting him as his disciple was that he had to become a primordial chaos venerable. As far as he knew, there was only one primordial chaos venerable in the universe, and that was Senior Nether. In addition, Senior Nether's death seemed to have a lot to do with his teacher, Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong. I killed him with my own hands. Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong's voice was indifferent and calm, but the faint darkness in his eyes revealed his inner thoughts. Lin Feng didn't say anything, nor did he feel any emotion. To him, although Senior Nether had taught him, they had only met by chance and didn't have a deep relationship. Moreover, he was a member of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. At that time, I was too young and impulsive. Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong smiled, but there was a hint of sarcasm hidden in his smile. I transcended the universe and established the 7th Mercenary Alliance. I had great ambitions, but I didn't expect I was bewitched by the will of the heavenly path. Bewitched? Lin Feng was curious about his teacher's use of the word. The will of the heavenly path could bewitch an almighty? Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong took a deep breath. At that time, I hoped that the God of Eternity would find me and make a deal with me. He hoped that I would kill Nether, because when Nether grows up, he will take over the original universe and destroy it. What a joke. What AF asterisk king joke. Gritting his teeth, Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong cursed. The memory was still engraved in his heart. His face was a little ferocious. Even now, he still couldn't let it go. Lin Feng listened quietly. This was what he knew. The path of primordial chaos supremacy was to first take over the original black domain and then the original universe. The will of the heavenly path didn't seem to lie about this. However, the last sentence that his teacher said seemed to be a little questionable. He had taken over the original black domain and didn't destroy it. On the contrary, he had saved it. Therefore, there was a high chance that even if he took over the original universe, he wouldn't necessarily destroy it. The will of the heavenly path is despicable and shameless. How dare he lie to me? Grand Ancestor Tai Chiong was a sentimental person. He scolded whenever he wanted. However, this was his internal universe, so he naturally let him scold to his heart's content. What do you mean by destroying the universe? He destroyed himself. Chapter 2644. Lin Feng suddenly understood. That's right. Taking over the original universe would destroy the original universe's will of the heavenly path, not the original universe. The original black domain didn't have its own will because it hadn't truly grown, but the original universe did. It was a form body. Once the original universe was taken over, the will of the heavenly path would naturally cease to exist. Lin Feng already understood the gist of Patriarch Tai Chiong's words. If he were his teacher, he would have been fooled as well. After all, the one who spoke was Universe 7's Divine Inquisition, which had always been neutral and didn't care about worldly affairs. What it gave was the will of the heavenly path. How would his teacher know that the will of the heavenly path could also be selfish? That's too much. Patriarch Tai Chiong let out a long sigh. and the veins on his face gradually faded. Actually, the will of the heavenly path might not be lying to me. After all, the will of the heavenly path isn't sentient, but an instinct. It's very likely that it's hoping that old guy is just an alarmist and spouting nonsense. The God of eternity was the true intermediary that conveyed the will of the heavenly path. Everyone had selfish motives, and so did the God of eternity. If the will of the heavenly path was taken over, the original universe wouldn't be destroyed, but the will of the heavenly path would no longer be in control of the original universe. Without the will of the heavenly path, Universe 7's divine inquisition would only exist in name. Lin Feng's heart was clear. As far as he knew, the will of the heavenly path shouldn't be so roundabout, let alone deceive his teacher. The will of the heavenly path's messages were often more straightforward, because it didn't have intelligence. At least I've done what the will of the heavenly path promised me. Patriarch Taichung said slowly. The 5 giants today were actually just 3 at that time. I, Aokong, and Ancestor Qing have just established our own forces. Although we're ambitious, this isn't the Hongmeng Sea. Everything has to follow the laws of the universe and the will of the heavenly path. If it gives you convenience, then everything will go smoothly. If it wants you to be doomed, then there's no place for you to go. The will of the heavenly axiom has promised us that after we kill Nether, it will protect our 3 forces and allow us to spread our branches and leaves in the original universe and achieve great ambitions. He did not lie about this. So that was it. At this moment, Lin Feng completely understood. On one hand, the will of the heavenly Tao made a promise, and on the other hand, it secretly threatened. It used the carrot and the stick to knock out the old ancestor Taipong that day, and made a deal with the will of the heavenly Tao. Or it could be said that he made a deal with Universe 7's Inquisition. At that time, Heavenly Emperor Aokong and Ancestor Qing, the creator of the 30,000 spatial worlds and murdering God Tower, also made this deal. Teacher, there's no need to blame yourself too much. Even if you didn't do it, other mighty figures would have done it. Lin Feng knew very well that the will of the heavenly Tao and senior Netherworld were already irreconcilable. Just like how he and the will of the heavenly Tao were destined to meet the same end. Ancestor Taichung let out a long sigh, and he seemed to have aged a lot. This matter has become a thorn in my heart that I can't remove even now. For that little bit of profit, I ended up dragging myself into deep shackles for thousands of eras, and my improvement was slow. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. He felt guilty in his heart. To Patriarch Taichung, this was the most terrifying inner demon. Senior Yellow Spring, I've already let it go, Lin Feng said to Patriarch Taisong. Oh, Patriarch Taisong's eyes suddenly brightened a little, and he nodded thoughtfully. I forgot that you've seen Netherworld. Have you let it go? It's time to let it go. I should also let it go, but... Shaking his head, Patriarch Taisong still couldn't let it go. If it was so easy to let it go, he would have let it go long ago. Senior Netherworld knows that you've been protecting the 9 prison clan and the road to the Netherworld, so you've already paid off what you owe Senior Netherworld. Would the will of the heavenly Tao allow the road to the Netherworld to exist? Definitely not. But the road to the Netherworld still existed, and the 9 prison abyss was preserved. Senior Netherworld's inheritance had never stopped for thousands of eras. Universe 7's Inquisition had risked everything to kill Senior Netherworld. So how could they not remove the roots? Why? Obviously, it was because Teacher was protecting the road to the Netherworld. Only an existence like Teacher could not be afraid of the will of the heavenly Tao and protect the road to the Netherworld. He didn't even let Universe 7's Inquisition take away the Eternity God's skeleton and body. He could completely see Teacher's anger. That day, the will of the heavenly Tao had bewitched him and made him do a wrong thing that he would regret for the rest of his life. Lin Feng was not stupid. He knew the ins and outs of this matter and connected all the details. In fact, everything was clear when he connected the dots. Forgive me for being bold, but Teacher has become an almighty, and countless people have died under your blade. Even if you wrongly killed Senior Netherworld, you still feel guilty. Why are you still brooding about it? Lin Feng didn't understand. On the path of the strong, who didn't kill someone wrongly. Sometimes, it wasn't necessarily the so-called wrongful killing, but because everyone had different standpoints. Just like how he had killed the 9 prison clan before, it didn't mean anything. Because at that time, everyone was an enemy, not a friend. It was that simple. Teacher and senior netherworld didn't know each other. Even if he was bewitched by the great eternity god, it was at least a transaction. There was no right or wrong. Even if the will of the heavenly Tao was acting selfishly, there was nothing wrong with that. Must the will of the heavenly Tao be at the mercy of others? It couldn't even protect itself? But teacher's wrongful killing this time was something that he couldn't get over for thousands of years. Because I personally killed a great opportunity for myself. Elder ancestor Tai Chiong shook his head and looked at Lin Feng as if he was looking at his own child. Teacher's cultivation has been shackled for a long time. This time, I went to Homing's 1,000 Perception Mountain for 2 reasons. First, it was for the Hongmeng source item, and second, it was to break the cage. If I wasn't impulsive and stupid back then and wrongly killed Senior Netherworld, my cultivation wouldn't stop at this today. Damn it, Lin Feng suddenly understood. When one's strength reached teacher's level, it was harder than reaching the heavens to improve. Although he didn't know what Senior Netherworld could help teacher, teacher must have his reasons for saying that. It was just that he didn't understand it now. Teacher had ruined his own hopes of improving. No wonder teacher always had this barrier in his heart. Moreover, he was bewitched and deceived, and wrongly killed Senior Netherworld, which made teacher feel even more regretful. In the future, when this disciple succeeds in his studies, if teacher needs this disciple, I will definitely do my best. Lin Feng bowed his head. Senior Netherworld could help teacher because he was the one and only primordial chaos origin venerable. Since Senior Netherworld could help teacher, then he would definitely be able to help teacher in the future. Ha ha! Elder ancestor Tai Chiong laughed and looked at Lin Feng with a smile in his eyes. You're smart, but don't misunderstand. The reason I chose you as my disciple wasn't for myself, but because of the promise I made to Senior Netherworld. I understand, Lin Feng said. Elder ancestor Tai Chiong nodded and said with a deep gaze, moreover, teacher's trip to Homing's 1,000 Perception Mountain is to destroy and build. I have already thrown away everything. If I can walk out of Homing's 1,000 Perception Mountain in the future, I will have broken the shackles and become extraordinary. If I can't, haha, then I will sleep here forever. Chapter 2645. Hongmeng Sea, Hongmeng, Qianjua Mountain. Even if ancestor Tai Chiong did not explain in detail, Lin Feng knew that this was not an ordinary place. Even with his teacher's strength, he could be trapped here. However, his situation did not seem to be much better. Senior Netherworld's matter was still vivid in his mind. Now, he had also embarked on this path of no return. The will of the heavenly path and the 7th universe's divine inquisition would not let him go easily, just like when he made a deal with the Almighties to kill Senior Netherworld. In the original universe, the will of the heavenly path had too much power. Disciple, you don't have to worry. Since I let you go on this path, I will protect you. Ancestor Tai Chiong looked at Lin Feng and smiled. You can stay in Tai Chiong God Realm with peace of mind. With your senior brother and second senior brother, no one can hurt you. The primordial chaos venerable has a perfect inner universe. After 2 transformations and stepping into the ultimate God Realm, his inner universe is almost comparable to that of the Almighty's. At that time, he can leave the original universe and enter the Hongmeng Sea. In the original universe, the 7th universe's divine inquisition is endowed with the will of the heavenly path and is powerful. But entering the Hongmeng Sea, it's not up to them. I have been to Hongmeng Sea for endless eras and know thousands of people. At that time, you'll have nothing to fear. Unfortunately, I am now in Hongmeng Qianjua Mountain. Otherwise, I would be in Tai Chiong God Realm and protect you. Ancestor Tai Chiong held a ferocious sword in his hand, showing his domineering aura. It was a kind of absolute strength and confidence. He was overbearing and looked down on others. At present, not only was he not afraid of the Seventh Universe's divine inquisition, but he was also not afraid of the other almighties. Thank you, teacher. Lin Feng was surprised, but more than that, he felt warm. He originally thought that this trip would be to roam the world and explore the God Realm battlefield, but he did not expect his teacher to be so meticulous and had already arranged everything. This kind of thought was truly the most valuable thing. Tai Qiong God Realm, next to the statue of Ancestor Tai Qiong. The news of the great ancestor's appearance spread like wildfire. Soon, everyone knew about it. Many emperors and supremacies rushed over, including many ultimate gods who rarely showed their faces. It had been too long. It had been a long time since they last saw their ancestor. The huge square was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The entire void was covered by the figures of the venerables like dark clouds covering the sun. Looking at the statue of great ancestor Tai Qiong that was covered in white light, they were in awe. Some of them whispered in secret. What happened? Most of them had only heard of it, but had never seen it with their own eyes. As for meeting the Tai Qiong Patriarch, there was no need to even think about it. Although the Seventh Mercenary Alliance had been established by the Tai Qiong Patriarch, all the affairs had already been handed over to his eldest disciple, Yuan Venerate Fugue. Many of the ultimate gods who came had never seen Patriarch Tai Qiong before. For example, Hierarch Anqing. He had arrived a long time ago. He already knew that Lin Feng had become Patriarch Tai Qiong's disciple, and he was temporarily acting as Lin Feng's teacher. Even so, Hierarch Anqing had long regarded Lin Feng as his true disciple. My disciple has a bright future ahead of him. Hierarch Anqing was very happy. He was not a petty person. He was happy for Lin Feng from the bottom of his heart, that Lin Feng could be accepted as a disciple by old ancestor Tai Qiong. He also knew that it was not easy to become old ancestor Tai Qiong's disciple. There had to be extremely harsh conditions involved. Supreme God Anqing didn't ask, but he knew that Lin Feng had done it, and he had done it perfectly. Although Lin Feng had just become a venerate, his strength had already made Hierarch Anqing's heart palpitate slightly. This was purely the intuition of a godly venerate powerhouse, as well as a reaction from his internal universe. His disciple, Lin Feng, was very strong now. He is even stronger than venerate Yinwu. Hierarch Anqing had watched Hierarch Yinwu grow up step by step until his name had shaken the universe, and he had become an overlord that could be considered an unrivaled ultimate god. This was because Hierarch Yinwu was a chaotic ultimate god. However, his disciple, Lin Feng, was even stronger than Hierarch Yinwu. Furthermore, much stronger. My disciple did not become a chaotic venerate or a perfect primordial chaos venerate. What kind of venerate is he? Hierarch Anqing was also curious, but he did not ask too much. After all, he knew that this was very likely the main reason the Tai Qiong Patriarch had accepted Lin Feng as his disciple. After staying in the Seventh Mercenary Alliance for countless eras, Hierarch Anqing had seen too much. Many talented people have been looked down upon by the Tai Qiong Patriarch, including Yuan Venerate powerhouses such as Luoshen, Umbrella Yin, Yi Dao, and many others. They had all been accepted as disciples by Yuan Venerate powerhouses. The Tai Qiong Patriarch had only accepted 2 disciples in his lifetime. The first disciple was a rich Yuan Venerate who had founded the Tai Qiong lineage and led the Seventh Mercenary Alliance. He was the leader of the 7 main lineages in terms of power and strength. The second disciple was a poor Yuan Venerate who had founded the true Patriarch's lineage. He had an arrogant and unruly nature and was extremely dissatisfied with his senior brother, Yuan Venerate Fugue. Among the 7 main lineages, he was second only to the Tai Qiong lineage. His strength was a mystery, but it was said that he was not weaker than Yuan Venerate Fugue. His 2 disciples were very famous in the Origin universe and intimidated the other Yuan Venerates of the 5 great factions. Their strength had already reached the peak of the Yuan Venerate. As the third disciple of the Tai Qiong Patriarch, how bad could Lin Feng be? Given time, my little disciple will definitely ride the wind and break the waves and shock the entire universe. Hierarch Anqing crossed his arms and looked at the statue of the Taichung patriarch expectantly. A disciple who could surpass his master was definitely a teacher's pride. Hierarch Anqing did not care about all the gossip around him. He had seen too much envy and jealousy. After all, everyone had their own selfish motives. Who wouldn't want to meet the legendary Almighty, the Taichung patriarch? Lin Feng was just a newcomer who had just stepped into the circle of venerates, so it was inevitable that he would attract jealousy. It's no wonder that his strength has stagnated. Hierarch Anqing despised him. In his opinion, venerates who did not think about themselves were narrow-minded and would not be able to achieve great things. Soon, they will realize how foolish they are. The corners of Hierarch Anqing's mouth curled up as he looked into the distance. He had already sensed the arrival of several powerful auras. They were far stronger than the godly venerables and sovereign venerables here. The void rippled, and the entire space seemed to have stopped. The battle array was majestic and shocking. Who is that? Which supreme god is it? What a powerful aura. No, it's not a supreme god. It's a Yuan venerate. Look, the venerates were a little flustered. Although it was rare to see the statue of the patriarch, it was only a statue after all and did not have any imposing aura. However, a Yuan venerate was different. He was a true powerhouse who stood at the peak of the origin universe. Regardless of strength or status, he was extremely intimidating. Furthermore, there were 3 of them this time. Greetings, Yuan venerate. Huang Zun and the venerates bowed respectfully in unison. Chapter 2646. A Yuan venerate had arrived. The 3 Yuan venerates hovered in the void with overwhelming might. In the middle was a man with a red face. His skin was covered in exquisite heavenly Tao runes and a single golden and white horn on his forehead that contained boundless power. He had his hands clasped behind his back and looked dignified. This was the unrivaled Yuan venerate of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Yuan venerate Fu. He was the eldest disciple of Patriarch Taichung. The man on the left was dressed in black and white robes and had a feather crown on his head. He was holding a unique chaos treasure, the ancient sky chess. He was Yuan venerate Yi Dao, the disciple of Yuan venerate Fu, who had wanted to take Lin Feng as his disciple. On the right was a beautiful woman with a sweet smile. She seemed to always have a smile on her face. Her flawless smile seemed to have boundless charm. Although it wasn't seductive, it still made one's mind ripple. She was the other Yuan venerate of the 7th Mercenary Alliance's 14 Yuan venerates, Yuan venerate Xiaoyan, Yuan venerate Fu, Yuan venerate Yi Dao, and Yuan venerate Xiaoyan were the 3 Yuan venerates of the Taichung lineage. The Taichung lineage was also the only one of the 7 main lineages that had 3 Yuan venerates. The arrival of the 3 shocked all the venerates on the plaza. I have 3 announcements to make. Yuan venerate Fu clasped his hands behind his back and scanned the crowd of venerates. His vigorous voice reverberated throughout the plaza. The first announcement is that teacher has officially accepted Lin Feng as his disciple. I have issued a decree to announce to the Taichung sacred realm today. Boom! The entire plaza exploded. The group of supreme experts widened their eyes, all of them stupefied. This news came too suddenly, too shocking. This was the Taichung patriarch, a legendary almighty. Most of them had never seen the patriarch before. Today, a newly ascended venerate had been accepted as a disciple by the Taichung patriarch. The disparity was immediately apparent. If Lin Feng had been there, he would have been drowned in envy and jealousy. How long had it been since the Taichung patriarch had accepted a disciple? Too long, too long. It had been so long that they didn't know whether the Taichung patriarch was dead or alive. What would happen if one became the Taichung patriarch's disciple? One would soar. When an almighty wanted to nurture a disciple, they would definitely spare no expense. This was because the cost was not even worth mentioning to an almighty. The 2 disciples of the Taichung patriarch were both peak Yuan venerates now. Of course, this was related to their own talent and aptitude, but it was definitely not without the careful nurturing of Patriarch Taipong. Only then could they ride the wind and break through the waves and reach that supreme level. However, whether one could surpass the shackles of life and become an almighty would depend on one's luck. This was something that even almighties were powerless to do. The second piece of news is that everyone is celebrating. This is not only a joyous occasion for our teacher, but also a joyous occasion for our 7th Mercenary Alliance. Everyone, you can go ahead and collect your quota of chaos gems and contribution points. The quota is linked to your own strength. In addition, teachers will reveal the heavenly Tao for an era. Everyone can comprehend it on their own. As for how much you can comprehend, that will depend on your own fortune. Wah! He was wild with joy. If the first piece of news was shocking and envious, then the second piece of news was a huge surprise. Chaos gems were very important to the Venerates and Huang Zun. As for contribution points, every Venerate, including godly Venerate powerhouses, needed them. With chaos gems, but without contribution points, one could not exchange them for the highest level treasures. Previously, the Venerates were still a little unconvinced and even jealous of Lin Feng. However, this was now washed away by the reward. Lin Feng had been accepted as a disciple by the Taichung Patriarch. What was done could not be undone. It was his own good fortune, so there was no point in being envious. It could only be said that everyone had their own fate and they did not have such good luck. However, at least because of their relationship with Lin Feng, they had received a considerable reward, which was considered a considerable gain. At the thought of this, Huang Zun and the Venerates could not help but have a good impression of Lin Feng. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan looked at Yuan Venerate Fugue with admiration. In terms of methods and boldness, they were far inferior to their teacher. With just a few words, their teacher had subdued a group of Venerates. This was the ability of a big shot in power. However, it was just a small profit, and it was enough to completely adjust the atmosphere. Even if Yuan Venerate Fugue did not do these favors, it was inevitable that the Venerates would feel a little uncomfortable. After all, anyone who could become a Venerate was arrogant, talented, and petty. They might even have some complaints about the 7th Mercenary Alliance because of this. However, all the problems had now been resolved. Even if they were not completely resolved, at least they would not become a problem anymore. Emotions were contagious. Even if some Venerates were still unhappy, they would be infected by the surrounding atmosphere and slowly forget about it. Furthermore, the statue of the Patriarch had manifested the heavenly Tao, so it was a huge piece of cheese for the Venerates who were determined to cultivate the heavenly Tao. Most importantly, it was a forewarning shot for the third piece of news. The Venerates did not know yet, but Yi Dao and Xiaoyan were already aware. The first two pieces of news were just small waves. The third piece of news was truly shocking, because once this piece of news was announced, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. However, this was the Patriarch's order. As Yuan Venerate powerhouses, they had naturally met the Patriarch Taichung and received guidance and favors from him. The Yuan Venerates would naturally fully support any command of the Patriarch Taichung, including this time. The third piece of news. Yuan Venerate Fugue swept his gaze across the overjoyed Venerates and poured a bucket of cold water over their heads. Everyone, prepare for battle. Prepare for battle? The Venerates were stunned. What would they fight? Who would they fight with? Which force in the vast universe would be so audacious as to challenge the 7th Mercenary Alliance? Could it be that the 5 big shots were going to go to war? Although Huang Zun and the Venerates were puzzled, Yuan Venerate Fugue had no intention of explaining. He simply announced the news as if it was a simple announcement. Furthermore, he himself was not sure if a battle would really happen. However, it was better to nip the problem in the bud than to nip it in the bud. The entire plaza was bustling with noise and excitement. The 3 pieces of news announced by Yuan Venerate Fugue were even more shocking than the previous one. Although they seemed irrelevant, the Venerates who were paying attention had already started to make some guesses. When the 3 pieces of news appeared at the same time, it was obvious that they were related. Do you guys think Lin Feng offended the other 5 big shots? I don't think so. Even if he offended an almighty, he would not go so far as to start a war with the 7th Mercenary Alliance. There must be some other reason. You're thinking too much. The two might not be related at all. No matter how great Lin Feng's potential is, it is not enough to cause a universe-level war. It's just a coincidence that Yuan Venerate Fugue linked them together. The Venerates were having a heated discussion as they expressed their views. Suddenly, whoosh, the light outside the statue of the Patriarch Taichung suddenly shone brightly before gradually disappearing. Lin Feng's figure returned to the line of sight of the Venerates and instantly became the focus of everyone's attention. He was like the most dazzling star in the sky. Chapter 26:47. What was going on? Lin Feng, who had just come out of the internal universe of his teacher, Patriarch Taifu, was a little confused. He had only been in there for a short while. At this moment, he was surrounded by sovereigns and venerables who had surrounded him. Swoosh! Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat as he lifted his head. His gaze landed on Yuan Venerate Fugue, Yuan Venerate Yi Dao, and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan. Lin Feng recognized Yuan Venerate Yi Dao. Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan had also heard about Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan from his teacher, Venerate God Anqing. As for Yuan Venerate Fugue, who was in charge of the entire 7th Mercenary Alliance, Lin Feng pays his respects to the 3 Yuan Venerates. Lin Feng bowed his head slightly and greeted them respectfully. This was a well-known etiquette in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. If one's strength was more than 2 levels lower, one had to greet them respectfully. For example, when a powerhouse like Huang Zun saw a Yuan Venerate, or when an ordinary Venerate saw a Divine Venerate. When an ordinary Venerate saw Huang Zun, or a Divine Venerate powerhouse saw a Yuan Venerate, there was no need to greet them. Eldest senior brother. Lin Feng nodded at the wealthy Yuan Venerate in the center. Although his teacher had already informed his eldest senior brother and second senior brother, Lin Feng still greeted them with proper etiquette to avoid any misunderstandings. As the saying went, no one would blame others for being too polite. Little junior brother, Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled and appeared beside Lin Feng in a flash. I've heard about your deeds and asked Yi Dao to take you in as a disciple. Yuan Venerate Fugue looked at Lin Feng and chuckled. I didn't expect you to be so talented that teacher would make an exception and take you in as a disciple. You and I are brothers, so fate has brought us together. Teacher has already told me about your situation. With me around, you don't have to worry about anything. A pair of big hands patted Lin Feng on the shoulder. His smile was pure and infectious, making people feel safe. Lin Feng nodded. He knew what his eldest senior brother meant. Thank you, eldest senior brother. You don't have to be so polite between us. Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled. It's not convenient to talk here. Come with me. Lin Feng nodded. He turned around and saw Supreme God and Qing in the crowd. He smiled and nodded. Supreme Divinity, Anqing crossed his arms and smiled calmly as he gave a thumbs up. They didn't speak, but they both knew what they were thinking. Let's go. As soon as Yuan Venerate Fu said that, he brought Lin Feng, Yuan Venerate Yi Dao, and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan into a spatial rift and disappeared. Gasps of surprise could be heard from below the square, and the envious gazes lingered for a long time. They were truly envious. A brat who had just become a Venerate had been accepted as a disciple by Patriarch Taiji and treated as one of the rich Yuan Venerates. He was even on the same level as Yuan Venerate Yi and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan. Carp leaping over the Dragon Gate. Don't waste time. Hurry up and comprehend it. What a clear heavenly Tao law. Almighties are indeed almighties. Old Ancestor is really too powerful. After an entire epoch, I'll definitely be able to break through the bottleneck and comprehend the true essence of the heavenly Tao. I really have to thank Lin Feng for getting such good benefits for us. Yes, the old ancestor's presence can only be encountered by chance. Only by embarking on the path of becoming a Venerate and comprehending the heavenly Tao was true cultivation. At this point, the strength of one's bloodline was no longer important. Everyone was basically standing on the same starting line when constructing their internal universes. The only difference was who had more comprehension of the heavenly Tao. Although primal chaos crystals and contribution points were also needed by the venerates, they were still external objects. Only comprehension of the heavenly Tao was truly needed. Taiji Hall was filled with nobility. This was the core of Taiji Hall's sacred domain, and Yuan Venerate Fu stayed there all year round. Yuan Venerate Fu was very busy because he had taken over as the Patriarch Taiji's disciple and managed the 7th Mercenary Alliance. On one hand, his main body was tempering and cultivating in various mystic realms of the universe to improve himself. On the other hand, he still had to divert some of his attention to manage the 7th Mercenary Alliance. It wasn't easy to manage one of the 5 big figureheads. There were many contradictions within the 7th Mercenary Alliance, and the various main factions were constantly fighting in secret. Even his junior brother, Yuan Venerate Fu, was unconvinced and wanted to climb up the ranks. Not to mention, the 5 big figureheads were competing with each other outside. The other powerful factions were also improving themselves and looking for opportunities to become the 6th big figurehead or replace one of the 5 big figureheads. Junior brother, follow me and cultivate in the future. Yuan Venerate Fu smiled. Teacher mentioned before that you have your own path to walk. You don't have to comprehend the heavenly Tao of teacher's consciousness clone, as it will only affect your own path. I understand. Lin Feng nodded. Teacher's path was explored by himself. Although it was also a heavenly Tao, it wasn't perfect. What Luo Yunyang wanted to walk was an orthodox and perfect heavenly Tao path that used the life aura of the universe as its source and the Milky Way super dark domain as its core to construct the most intrinsically perfect internal universe. He could only rely on himself and no one else. You can ask me about other aspects or look for Yi Dao and Xiaoyan. I believe they will be happy to help you. Yuan Venerate Fugue frowned as he looked into the distance and muttered, They came so quickly. Yi Dao. Yuan Venerate Fu turned his head. Teacher. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao nodded respectfully. Bring Lin Feng around to familiarize him with the environment and arrange a place for him to cultivate. Yuan Venerate Fu instructed before turning to Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan, make a trip to Hidden Supreme City and inform the Hidden Supreme City Lord. Yes, teacher. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan replied. Yuan Venerate Fugue nodded with a solemn look on his face. Then, he took 2 steps and quickly left Taichung Hall. Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan glanced at Lin Feng with a sweet smile that seemed to hide something else. She didn't say much before disappearing. Only Lin Feng and Yuan Venerate Yi Dao were left in the huge hall. They came? Lin Feng glanced at Yuan Venerate Yi Dao. Don't worry. Leave it to teacher. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao maintained his calm demeanor and smiled. Since Ancestral Master has decided to protect you, no one can touch you. Don't worry. Even if the Divine Tribunal of Universe 7 mobilizes all its forces, they can't do anything to us. Don't think too much. Cultivate well, and don't disappoint teacher and Ancestral Master. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao chuckled. Back then, I was very perceptive and knew that you would become a great talent even before Ancestral Master did. It's a pity that I didn't manage to snatch you as my disciple. What a pity. You flatter me, sir. Lin Feng replied humbly. If it hadn't been for his teacher, he would have become Yuan Venerate Yi Dao's disciple. However, their current relationship was still very close. Haha, who would have thought that you would become my uncle master in the blink of an eye? Yuan Venerate Yi Dao was also a carefree person. He laughed heartily and didn't feel awkward at all. Uncle master? Lin Feng was also stunned. It seemed like that was really the case. He had become the disciple of Ancestral Master Taichung and become the junior brother of Yuan Venerate Fu in Yuan Venerate Fu. So his seniority had increased a lot. Chapter 2648. Outside the Taichung Venerate God Realm. With the wild Kuan Grand Eternity God in the lead, he led 30 Eternity Gods, 300 divine adjudicators and 3,000 adjudicators over in a grandiose manner. They were like an iron-blooded army, and their icy cold eyes hid their determination and pride. Or the 5 great Leviathans. This was the original universe, which was managed by Universe 7's divine adjudicator. Although they didn't fight for fame and fortune, nor did they fight for territory, Universe 7's godly inquisition was quite arrogant. Although they weren't the masters of the universe, they were existences similar to the scavengers. Without them, there wouldn't be the current stable original universe. If you don't appear soon, we're going in. The Kuan Yi, great eternity god, had an arrogant look on his face. His 4 strong arms exuded vigorous and perfect source power, which was bestowed by the will of the sky. His strength was comparable to a peak Yuan venerate in the original universe. In the divine adjudicator of universe, he was second only to the sacred gold great eternity god. Standing in front of the Kuan Yi grand eternity god was a man in amber armor. There were sharp protrusions on his head that looked like horns, and there were faint markings on his face. His strong body was indomitable, and he stood alone. It was Hierarch Yenwu, who is known as the unrivaled hierarch. You can try. Hierarch Yenwu's iron fists were also filled with perfect source power as he spoke coldly. Although he was facing the divine adjudicator of Universe 7, his aura wasn't weak at all. Behind him was a group of hierarchs and Huangzun powerhouses. There were also many of them. This was the Taichung Venerate God Realm, the territory of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. How could others set foot here? Even the divine adjudicator of Universe 7 couldn't. The Huangzun and hierarchs all gathered their fighting spirit and stood facing each other. Let's fight. Who were they afraid of? They would be laughed at by the other 4 great Leviathans in the future if they cowered. Humph! The Kuan Yi great eternity god pursed his lips and avoided Hierarch Yenwu's gaze. He wasn't afraid of Hierarch Yenwu, but the 7th Mercenary Alliance was one of the 5 great Leviathans after all. It might not be appropriate to barge in. If it was a second-rate force, there wouldn't be so much nonsense. He would just barge in and capture them. However, this was the Taichung Venerate God Realm. If they were to really fight, in terms of numbers, they were not strong enough. In terms of peak strength, they were still not strong enough. However, the Kuan Yi Grand Eternity God didn't think that the 7th Mercenary Alliance would have the guts to start a war with them. He only wanted them to hand over a person. It was simple. Could it be that the 7th Mercenary Alliance would dare to go against the will of the Heavenly Tao? They didn't have to wait for long before the wealthy Yuan Venerate arrived. The imposing aura of a superior being and the faint smile on his face made the Kuan Yi Great Ian God feel a little uneasy. Sure enough, Yuan Venerate Fu's first sentence made his stance clear. Lin Feng is a member of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. How will the 7th Mercenary Alliance have the face to maintain a foothold in the universe if I let you take him away like this? Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled faintly, yet his words were as firm as a blade. You, the wild Kuan Great Ian God, had not expected Yuan Venerate Fugue to be so resolute. His face turned red with anger. Go back and tell Xingjin that just because the 7th Mercenary Alliance respects the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal doesn't mean that the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal can do whatever they want. Yuan Venerate Fugue added, if Lin Feng leaves the Taichung deity realm, you can capture or kill him as you wish. However, as long as Lin Feng remains in the Taichung deity realm, no one can touch him. Yuan Venerate Fugue's voice was heavy and forceful. The Huangzun and the supreme gods behind him were deeply affected. They raised their arms and cheered wildly, looking like an invincible army. At the moment, they deeply felt that they were a part of the 7th Mercenary Alliance and felt the confidence of the 5 big figureheads. No one could touch him. In the Taichung deity realm, no one could touch the people of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. This was the confidence of Yuan Venerate Fugue, as well as the confidence of the 7th Mercenary Alliance as one of the 5 big figureheads. Do you know what you were saying? The Kuan Yi Great Ian God's eyes were filled with hatred. His shark-like teeth were frightening, and the image of a huge beast appeared behind him, as if it was going to swallow the sky. Yuan Venerate Fugue placed his hands behind his back. Instead of retreating, he took a big step forward. A green battle saber behind him flickered with an extremely bright luster and emitted waves of dragon roars. His aura was overflowing and was not inferior to the Kuan Yi great Ian gods. If you want to fight, I will accompany you to the end. Yuan Venerate Fugue raised his hand, and the green dragon sky, slashing saber, instantly resonated with the universe and distorted space. Its aura was far stronger than that of Supreme God Yenwu. Behind him, the Supreme Gods and Huang Zun felt their blood boil. They had never seen such a Yuan Venerate Fugue before. They had been so busy with the affairs of the Mercenary Alliance that they had even forgotten that Yuan Venerate Fugue had already been known as an invincible Yuan Venerate in the universe thousands of eras ago. Clack! Clack! The Kuan Yi great Ian god gnashed his teeth fiercely. He had thought that this trip would be very easy. No matter how he thought about it, the 7th Mercenary Alliance wouldn't offend the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal for a Venerate. Who would have thought that Yuan Venerate Fugue's attitude would be so unyielding? With the power of the heavenly path, the Kuan Yi great Ian god was confident that he could fight against Yuan Venerate Fugue in the Origin universe. But what about after that? Unless he could completely defeat Yuan Venerate Fugue, it was impossible for him to directly attack and capture Linfeng to complete his mission. Furthermore, the Kuan Yi great Ian god wasn't completely confident. After all, he wasn't sure how strong Yuan Venerate Fugue was. It was hard to stop halfway. Fight! 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 The Supreme Gods and Huang Zun of the 7th Mercenary Alliance shouted in unison. In a short time, a large number of Huang Zun and Supreme Gods arrived. The number of them far exceeded the number of deacons and enforcers of the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal. The momentum was one-sided. If the Kuan Yi great Ian god had been hesitant before, his expression had completely changed now. He would only lose face if he stayed any longer. Yuan Venerate Fugue wasn't the only Yuan Venerate in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. If he really went to war, he wouldn't benefit at all. Furthermore, Sheng Jin had only asked him to capture Linfeng. He hadn't asked him to start a war with the 7th Mercenary Alliance. The 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal flaunted its independence and impartiality. Things wouldn't end well if he made a move. The Kuan Yi Grand Eternity God was naturally not stupid. He would not do something that would only bring him harm and no benefit. You will regret it, Fugue. The Kuan Yi Great Ian God gritted his teeth and glared at Yuan Venerate Fugue. You know very well what the consequences of offending the heavenly path are. Go back. Yuan Venerate Fugue ordered him to leave. This isn't a place you should be. Even if Sheng Jin were here today, I would still say the same thing. In the Taichung deity realm, the members of the 7th Mercenary Alliance, you can't take anyone away. Chapter 2649. Linfeng settled down beside Yuan Venerate Fu's residence. As the disciple of the Taichung Patriarch, Linfeng had a lot of authority in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Other ultimate Venerate powerhouses needed contribution points to exchange for treasures, but Linfeng didn't. According to Yuan Venerate E, he could take whatever he wanted directly. Basically, the top treasures in the 7th Mercenary Alliance's treasury were provided by the 14th Yuan Venerate powerhouse. Linfeng could take whatever he wanted directly. However, Linfeng didn't want to take anything for the time being. Furthermore, the matter at hand hadn't been properly handled yet. The dispute with the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal. Ever since the Kuan Yi Great Eternity God had been forced to retreat, the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal had come to cause trouble again. That time, the Kuan Yi Great Eternity God had brought along the other 4 Great Eternity Gods of the Divine Tribunal. Over 100 Eternity God powerhouses had come. They seemed to have brought some conditions, and the power of the 5 Great Eternity Gods was faintly forcing the 7th Mercenary Alliance to submit. However, Yuan Venerate Fu's attitude was still very firm. After a full 10 days of confrontation, the 7th Mercenary Alliance also dispatched 5 Yuan Venerate powerhouses to show that they were going to fight to the end. In the end, the Kuan Yi Great Eternity God still didn't dare start a war with the 7th Mercenary Alliance. However, this confrontation left a huge impact on the Taichung Venerate God realm. All the Venerates and Huang Zun completely understood what Yuan Venerate Fu had said that day. Paper couldn't contain fire. They also knew that the origin of this matter was Lin Feng. Although the majority of the Venerates still supported Lin Feng and supported Yuan Venerate Fu's decision, there were also some Venerates who were critical. Lin Feng naturally knew. On one hand, he had made many friends in the Taichung Venerate God realm. On the other hand, his teacher, Supreme Venerate Anqing, hadn't hidden anything from him. What should he do? Should he continue to stay in the Taichung Venerate God realm or leave? Lin Feng didn't doubt his eldest senior brother Yuan Venerate Fu, nor did he doubt his teacher, the Taichung Patriarch. A promise was worth 1,000 gold. Since his teacher had said it, he would definitely protect him to the end. Eldest senior brother Yuan Venerate Fu was as steady as a mountain. The question now was whether the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal would let this matter go. Should he stay or leave? Lin Feng knew very well that his teacher had laid out a perfect path for him. He only needed to cultivate step by step with the best resources. He believed that it wouldn't take long for him to become a supreme god. When that time came, the universe in his body would transform twice and be comparable to that of a powerful being. He would be self-sufficient enough to leave the original universe and enter the Hongmeng Sea. In the Hongmeng Sea, he had his teacher's protection, and it was no longer the territory of the will of the heavenly Tao. He had nothing to fear. But what if I leave? Luck or misfortune was unknown. The supreme God-world battlefield was a purgatory furnace with endless corpses. In addition, Universe 7's godly judgment was determined to kill. It was very likely that he would follow in Senior Netherworld's footsteps. Even someone as strong as Senior Yellow Springs was unwilling to die that day. Right now, he was much weaker than Senior Yellow Spring, and the danger he faced would only be greater. Lin Feng wasn't someone who was afraid of death. He also liked to roam the world. But if there was a broad road to walk on, who would really like to walk on a rugged and muddy path? After all, his strength was still in the state of being promoted. Even if he left, Lin Feng hoped to be in a better state and stronger strength so that he could better protect himself. I'll take it one step at a time. At least, I hope to buy a little more time. Lin Feng was clear in his heart. He didn't have much time left. If the 7th Mercenary Alliance and the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal really started a war, because of him, he would definitely leave at that time. Even if the situation was dangerous after leaving, he wouldn't stay in the Supreme God realm. Lin Feng couldn't be selfish and implicate other venerables. Qin Emperor's origin bead is too difficult to refine. During this period of time, Lin Feng had been refining the Qin Emperor's origin beads. However, there were a total of 108 Qin Emperor's origin beads. Refining each one required a great deal of effort. Until now, he had only refined a few. It would take a long time to completely refine all of them. This was because the Qin Emperor's origin heart's basic ability, all-encompassing, could be used to refine all kinds of treasures. Otherwise, with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to refine the Qin Emperor's origin beads at all. However, Lin Feng knew very well that once he refined all the Qin Emperor's origin beads, his strength would increase tremendously. At that time, he would have the strength to protect himself when he left. The Qin Emperor's origin beads and Qin Emperor's origin crystals were all in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. The Qin Emperor's origin crystals were given to several venerables and Huang Zun by a rich Yuan Venerate. Although this treasure wasn't completely compatible, it contained the complete yin-yang unification heavenly Tao and was an excellent cultivation treasure. It wouldn't be easy to take them all back in a short time. After all, many venerables and Huang Zun weren't in the Supreme God realm. However, Lin Feng wasn't in a hurry. The Qin Emperor's origin crystals were of little value to him and weren't very useful. He cultivated the 9 heavens of light and darkness, not the yin-yang unification technique. The Qin Emperor's origin bead alone was enough. Once the Qin Emperor's origin bead was completely integrated, it would be more than enough to display its power. As for the Neon Zero Sky bead given to him by Senior Underworld, he had already refined it a long time ago. This was much simpler than refining the Qin Emperor's origin bead. This moon-red bead didn't have too many complicated functions, but it could completely conceal one's aura. Even Almighties couldn't easily detect it. Its function was already irreplaceable. Time continued to pass. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng had already refined more than half of the Qin Emperor's origin beads. Relying on the all-encompassing ability of the Qin Emperor's origin heart, he slowly refined them one by one like grinding an iron rod into a needle. After 2 confrontations, the 7th Universe's godly tribunal seemed to have given up and was no longer doing anything. However, Lin Feng knew that the 7th Universe's godly tribunal wouldn't give up. They would treat him the same way they treated Senior Underworld back then. There was no news at the moment. It was very likely that they were preparing for something, calculating something, or had other plans. In any case, it was good to buy some time. I hope I can hold on until the Qin Emperor's origin bead is completely refined. Lin Feng had already refined more than half of the Qin Emperor's origin bead and vaguely understood the functions of the Qin Emperor's origin bead. This was a true top-notch treasure comparable to a supreme chaos treasure. Even if he could only use the most basic ability now, it was definitely not comparable to an ordinary supreme chaos treasure. Even Yuan Venerate powerhouses didn't have many supreme chaos treasures. The highest grade of the supreme chaos treasures in the 7th Mercenary Alliance's treasury was only perfect, and there weren't many of them. There wasn't even a single pinnacle true treasure. After all, pinnacle true treasures were a necessity for 14 Yuan Venerate powerhouses. Time passed day by day. A storm was brewing, and Lin Feng's uneasiness grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, opening his eyes, a sharp light flashed through them. Lin Feng slowly stood up, an indescribable feeling spreading through his heart. Lin Feng heaved a sigh of relief as he looked into the distance. The 7th Universe's godly tribunal had finally arrived. Chapter 2650. Some things can't be avoided. It's useless to escape. What needs to be solved must be solved. Lin Feng naturally hoped to have a little more time, but Universe 7's godly inquisition was obviously not so kind. After hesitating for a long time, they must have come fully prepared this time. Things always need to come to an end. Unfortunately, it would be better if I had a little more time. Lin Feng put away the Qin Emperor's origin bead and checked his storage ring. Although things have happened, his mood didn't fluctuate too much, because he knew that this day would come. It's a fight to the death. Lin Feng smiled. When he first set foot on this road, he knew what the result would be, but he didn't regret it. The road to becoming a powerhouse is destined to be full of blood and thorns. If he was afraid of fighting and death, he wouldn't have become a primal chaos venerable. Where the heart desires, only the strongest. Senior brother, it's time for me to leave. Lin Feng didn't want his senior brother to become a grindstone and be sandwiched between him and the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Although he didn't mind, he felt sorry. Lin Feng couldn't make the entire 7th Mercenary Alliance go to war with Universe 7's godly inquisition for him. He was not a soft-hearted person, but he was also not a selfish person. Some things should be done. There were some things that couldn't be done and would never be done. I've always been alone, walking alone. Now I'm just returning to normal. Lin Feng had long been used to being alone and used to being alone. He had been like this since he was a child, and it was still the same now. Thank you for taking care of me during this time, senior brother. Let me put an end to this matter. Lin Feng stepped out of his residence with a calm expression. The residence was spotless, and everything had been returned to its original place. The peaceful days didn't belong to him. Perhaps this is my destiny. Lin Feng smiled faintly. His eyes revealed a faint desire to battle, like a raging flame. The tree wants to be still, but the wind doesn't stop. Tai Qiong God Realm at the border. The two forces confronted each other, and their auras were majestic. Universe 7's godly inquisition had come for the third time, and it had brought with it both sincerity and hostility. This time, it wasn't the Kuan Yi Great Ian God who was the commander, but the Shang Jin Great Ian God. He was the most powerful Ian God who had punished the earth. Eons ago, Shang Jin was already one of the three strongest universe gods of Universe 7's godly inquisition. Now, his strength was even more unfathomable. Just by standing there, his aura had already suppressed the 7th Mercenary Alliance. You better think carefully before rejecting me. Rich. Although Shang Jin was smiling, there was a deep coldness in his smile. There's nothing to talk about. Yuan Venerate Fugue had a calm expression on his face. I made it very clear the first time. This is the territory of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. In the Taichung deity realm, the members of the 7th Mercenary Alliance, you can't take anyone with you. Sonorous and powerful, the azure dragon sky, slaying blade in the hands of the rich Yuan Venerate let out a dragon roar as its battle intense soared. Yuan Venerate Fugue knew that this battle wouldn't end well the moment eternal god Shang Jin arrived. Universe 7's godly inquisition hadn't been willing to lower its head, and he wouldn't lower his head either. He had never thought of doing so. A man's word was worth 1,000 gold. If he couldn't even protect his junior brother, how could he still have the face to stand in the universe? What about Fugue? You alone aren't enough. The great eternity god Shang Jin had a faint smile on his face as he rubbed his thumb with a hint of disdain in his eyes. His indifferent tone caused the expressions of the sovereigns from the 7th Mercenary Alliance to change. Yuan Venerate Fugue, who was known as an invincible Yuan Venerate, couldn't compare to Shang Jin. I alone am enough. Yuan Venerate Fugue didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao and Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan, who were behind him, had grave expressions on their faces. The strength of the 14th Yuan Venerate was clear in their hearts. Perhaps Yuan Venerate Fugue had indeed been known as an invincible Yuan Venerate thousands of years ago. However, there were new talents in every generation, so Yuan Venerate Fugue was no longer truly invincible. There were 3 people in the 7th Mercenary Alliance who were stronger than Yuan Venerate Fugue. Suddenly, boom, a huge hole seemed to have been struck in the sky by a bolt of lightning. Endless lightning wrapped around the figure of a man with disheveled hair. The brown martial attire on his body was full of holes and patches, looking tattered and dirty. His bare feet were black, and even the saber in his hand was covered in mud. However, his appearance caused the entire heaven and earth to change expressions. Even Shang Jin's expression became a little more serious. Yuan Venerate Fugue, the second disciple of Patriarch Taichung, was even more talented than Yuan Venerate Fugue. Uncle Master is here. Great, it's Uncle Master. Fugue is finally here. Great. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao, Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan, Yuan Venerate Hermit, and Yuan Venerate Sanin all smiled. Huang Zun and the other supreme venerates of the 7th Mercenary Alliance might not know, but they knew very well that Yuan Venerates Fugue couldn't compare to Yuan Venerates Fugue in terms of strength. Yuan Venerate Fugue had truly obtained the true inheritance of Patriarch Taichung. His strength ranked 2nd in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Junior brother, Yuan Venerate Fugue also smiled with relief. Thud! Yuan Venerate Fugue floated in the sky with lightning wrapped around his body. His tiger-like eyes were coldly sizing up the universe gods of the 7th Universe's divine tribunal. He had a domineering and unruly aura that was different from Yuan Venerate Fugue's. What is this? Yuan Venerate Fugue asked coldly. Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled. I thought you wouldn't come. You thought? Everything is just your imagination. Yuan Venerate Fugue turned his head and stared at Yuan Venerate Fugue. Don't always think of yourself as a saint. You just entered the sect before me. Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled, but didn't explain. He knew his junior brother's temper the best. He had a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come. Lin Feng is your junior brother and also my junior brother. Yuan Venerate Fugue was like a fierce tiger. His black scarlet tiger demon Thunderblade shone with a cold light and surged with a surging aura. A black and red scarlet tiger condensed around his body as thunder and lightning surged. Whoosh! Yuan Venerate Fugue raised his head in disdain as he stared at Shengjin, who was smiling faintly. "You're just a lackey of the heavenly great path. How dare a piece of scrap metal try to intimidate others? If we were in the Hongmeng Sea, you would have died a long time ago." Fighting in the original universe was different from fighting in the Hongmeng Sea. The original universe not only had an upper limit to one's strength, but it also had supreme nomological laws and the heavenly great path's will. The eternal God was favored by the heavenly great path's will and had an absolute home field advantage. Even an ordinary eternal God could unleash the strength of a peak Yuan Venerate. So what? Shengjin smiled at Yuan Venerate Fugue and raised his eyebrows. "Are you guys coming one by one or together? You must have a death wish." Yuan Venerate Fugue roared. In an instant, the sky changed colors and thunder and lightning filled the sky. His blade was aimed straight at Shengjin. He wasn't as wishy-washy as Yuan Venerate Fugue. There was no room for negotiation, so why waste time? Strike first and gain the upper hand. Chapter 2651. Poor Yuan Venerates always had fiery tempers. Peace was the most precious thing in his mind. It was the same in the Hongmeng Sea, and it was the same in the original universe. He didn't care about the transcendent status of the seventh universe's godly inquisition and the bestowal of the heavenly Tao's will. Bah, they're just a few lackeys. Not only did the poor Yuan Venerate inherit the true skills of the Taichung Patriarch, but his personality was also as carefree and uninhibited as the Taichung Patriarch. He would fight if he wanted to. Just as he had said, if this had been the Hongmeng Sea, a mere eternal god like Shengjin would have been obliterated long ago. The supreme chaotic cardinal treasure, the red tiger demonic thunder saber, displayed its divine power. The Yuan Venerate saber technique was only slightly weaker than the Taichung Patriarch's. Although the saber technique he used was different from the Taichung Patriarch's, it was obvious that they were from the same lineage and had similar effects. Thunder rumbled as the red and black crimson tiger tore at the eternal god Shengjin. The majestic aura started a war between universe giants, a battle between Yuan Venerate powerhouses. Kaka, I can finally fight to my heart's content. Kuan Yi, great Ian god, the #1 general below the great Ian god Shengjin, unleashed his strength to his heart's content. He had been extremely sullen the last 2 times, but this time he was under the command of the great Ian god Shengjin, so he could finally go all out. He was the grand Aeon god, so when had he ever feared anyone? Even if it was the 7th Mercenary Alliance, the Kuan Yi Grand Eternity God didn't care about them. After all, they had the will of the heavenly Tao as their backing. With a roar, he charged straight at the most despicable Yuan Venerate Fu. The Kuan Yi Great Ian God didn't want to wait a moment longer. The previous 2 times Yuan Venerate's Fu had angered him to the core. Now, he had to get his revenge. The barbarian dragon Great War God, whose strength was second only to the Kuan Yi Great Ian God, revealed his true form. His huge body was a ferocious brown-red demonic dragon with a ferocious mouth. The Yin-Yang Universe God's ultimate treasure, the black-white wheel, emitted dazzling starlight. On the other side, the immemorial chessboard in the hands of Yuan Venerate Yi Dao also combined black and white. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of moves had been exchanged. The prison-breaching eternal god's body was huge like a giant beast that dominated the world. Its terrifying muscles resonated with the world as it pressed down on Yuan Venerate Hermit. Yuan Venerate Hermit's physical body was very small. His movement technique was flickering in and out of existence, leaving behind a series of afterimages as he killed decisively with an invisible dagger. The Black Flame Eternal God was extremely ugly, yet he was facing off against Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan, who was as beautiful as a fairy. In terms of strength, Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan had just become a Yuan Venerate not too long ago and was far from being a match for the Black Flame, Eternal God. The 6 great eternity gods of Universe 7, including Shengjin, were all comparable to peak Yuan Venerates because they had been bestowed with the will of the Great Path. Apart from the poor Yuan Venerates and the rich Yuan Venerates, the other 4 Yuan Venerates of the 7th Mercenary Alliance were at a disadvantage. This was especially true for Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan and Yuan Venerate Yidao. Yuan Venerate Hermit's strength was about the same as Yuan Venerate Yi's. He was the most outstanding disciple of the hidden Venerate City Lord. Although there was still a gap between him and the Prison Breaker Eternal God, his exquisite movement techniques and nimble attacks were able to restrain the Black Flame Eternal God. A great battle had broken out. The godly Venerate powerhouses of the 7th Mercenary Alliance were up against the Universe Gods of Universe 7's Divine Tribunal. Supreme Venerate Yin Wu took the lead and was invincible, displaying the strength of an unrivaled godly Venerate. Huangzun powerhouses were up against the Divine Tribunal. Venerates were up against the Executioners. Everyone had a tacit understanding in this sort of battle between powerhouses. There would be no bullying of the weak. Godly Venerates were up against godly Venerates, and Yuan Venerates were up against Yuan Venerates. This was the most direct way of competing. However, the real key to victory or defeat still depended on the confrontation between the top forces. There were billions of forces in the universe, and there were many forces with more Venerates than the 5 great powerhouses. However, in the entire universe, only the 5 great powerhouses stood tall and their status was unshakable. Why? Not only because the 5 great powerhouses had almighties, but also because the 5 great powerhouses had a considerable number of Yuan Venerate powerhouses. Because the strength of almighties was limited, they might not be much stronger than peak Yuan Venerates in the original universe. Therefore, the powerhouses of the original universe really competed with the strength of Yuan Venerate powerhouses. The reason why the 7th universe's Divine Tribunal was strong and had a transcendent status was because they had 18 cosmos gods. Every cosmos god had the strength of a peak Yuan Venerate. The 5 great powerhouses were far inferior to them in this aspect. Even though only the 6 cosmos gods of the Divine Tribunal were present, they were already suppressing the 7th Mercenary Alliance. However, this was the Taichung Venerate God Realm. After experiencing the tempering of thousands of eras, the 7th Mercenary Alliance was still as stable as Mount Tai and stood at the peak of the universe. Yuan Venerate Fu took care of things properly, so how could he fight a battle that he was not confident in? Yuan Venerate Fu had already started making preparations since the day the Taichung Patriarch had informed him. He had already made plans to go to war with the 7th Universe's Divine Tribunal. He had already decided to protect his junior brother at all costs. This was his duty. Finally back, Yuan Venerate Fu smiled when he sensed the arrival of a few auras. The 7th Mercenary Alliance was very united. The 14 Yuan Venerates were as close as brothers. However, the Yuan Venerate powerhouses did not stay in the Taichung Venerate God Realm all year round. For example, the Qinzuan City Lord liked to stay in Qinzuan City. Yuan Venerate Demonic Spear liked to wander around. Yuan Venerate Ghost Gate liked to go to ancient battlefields to fight. Yuan Venerate Luo Shun spent most of his time in the Hongmeng Sea. Whoosh! A jade-green river hung on the horizon. A handsome man was standing on the river with a smile on his face. He was wearing a feathered crown and white robes. His skin was fair and flawless, enough to make any woman pale in comparison. It was Yuan Venerate Luo Shun. How could I miss out on such an interesting event? Yuan Venerate Luo Shun raised his hand, and the jade-green river shot toward the black flames Eternal God, enveloping the pitch-black flames that could burn everything. Water could overturn a boat, but it could also extinguish a fire. Yuan Venerate Xiaoyan, who was originally in a rather sorry state, felt much more relaxed and smiled beautifully at Yuan Venerate Luo Shun. There was clearly a different kind of friendship between the two of them. Luo Shun, why did you run so fast? Why didn't you wait for me? A deep and thick voice was heard, causing the poor Yuan Venerate, who was in a bitter battle with eternal god Shengjin, to jump. Master, I'm here to help you. The person who had come was fat and sturdy. He was dozens of meters tall and had a round head. He was holding a large jade-green saber with a bell hanging from it. He looked very funny. Yuan Venerate Great Saber was the disciple of a poor Yuan Venerate. The rich Yuan Venerate had two disciples who had become Yuan Venerates. One was Yi Dao, and the other was Xiaoyan. The poor Yuan Venerate only had one disciple who was worthy of being called Yuan Venerate Great Saber. However, his personality was a little silly. Scram! The poor Yuan Venerate did not even turn his head. Oh! Yuan Venerate Great Saber stopped in his tracks. Suddenly, Yuan Venerate Great Saber's eyes lit up when he saw the ferocious roaring dragon. He laughed heartily and rushed over. It was the barbaric dragon Eternal God, who was fighting Yuan Venerate Sanine. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao was puzzled. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that his situation was much worse than Yuan Venerate Sanyan's. Yuan Venerate Great Saber actually ignored him. Chapter 2652. However, Yuan Venerate Yi Dao wasn't too worried. After all, Yuan Venerate Luo Shun and Yuan Venerate Great Saber had arrived. Naturally, there would be another Yuan Venerate. After all, the three of them had been traveling the Hongmeng Sea all year round. Naturally, they wouldn't be lacking one. Boom! A violent explosion reverberated and forced the Yin-Yang god to retreat. The latter's expression changed. Yin and Yang combined and transformed into black and white rays of light. In an instant, a series of violent explosions occurred. The power of the explosions was extremely terrifying. They're here. Yuan Venerate Yi Dao felt relieved. The sinister laughter came from a bird-faced demon race powerhouse with a head full of unkempt hair. He had a pair of huge wings on his back, and his hands turned into claws that transformed into streaks of light. Explosions were constantly heard in the void. Yuan Venerate Explosion. Among the 14 Yuan Venerates, 3 of them were Yuan Venerates that didn't belong to the 7 main factions. Although they were new stars with shallow qualifications, their combat strength was rather impressive and not inferior to Yuan Venerate Yi Dao. Furthermore, they had been traveling the Hongmeng Sea all year round with Yuan Venerate Luo Shun and Yuan Venerate Great Saber and were very experienced. 6 versus 6 had become 9 versus 6. With the arrival of Yuan Venerate Luo Shun, Yuan Venerate Great Saber, and Yuan Venerate Explosion, the situation was immediately reversed. However, the 6 great eternity gods led by eternal god Shengjin weren't to be trifled with either. They had the power of the heavenly great path bestowed upon them. Although their numbers were slightly inferior, they were still evenly matched with the 7th Mercenary Alliance. They lived up to their reputation as the number 1 force in the universe. Yuan Venerates were well prepared, but how could eternal god Shengjin not have a trump card? After suffering 2 setbacks, he knew very well that it would take a lot of effort to take down the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Just the 6 great eternity gods of eternal god Shengjin weren't enough. Although he didn't have a harmonious relationship with eternal god Hope and eternal god Forever and belonged to the 3 main divisions, they were still interdependent. Once something happened to the heavenly great path, no one would be able to escape. Therefore, the 3 main divisions had worked together to kill Yellow Spring that day. As for mocking eternal god Shengjin, that was for another time. The crisis before them had to be dealt with first. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. In the distance, 3 golden lights flashed. The armor on his body was completely different from the symbol of Universe 7's Divine Inquisition. It was another division of Universe 7's Divine Inquisition, Heavenly Tao Samsara. The one in charge was Eternal Ian God, whose strength was even above Eternal Ian God Shengjin. He was the second in command of Universe 7's Divine Inquisition. 3 eyes, whale swallow, golden arrow, Shang Jin's eternal god was good at defense and remained unmoved under the fierce attacks of the poor Yuan venerates. However, he frowned slightly when he saw the three eternal gods who had come to support him. Although the three-eyed eternal god was the #1 general of the heavenly Tao Samsara, his strength was above that of the Kuan Yi Grand Eternal God, and he was even close to the Shang Jin Grand Eternal God. However, out of the 6 great eternity gods in the heavenly Tao Samsara, only 3 had come. The leader, Eternal Eternity God, had yet to appear. Damn you forever! They only sent three-eyed. Are they looking down on me? Shang Jin's Aeon God was furious. Previously, he had made a good promise, but at this critical moment, only a few useless soldiers had come. How could he not be angry? Well, it's better than nothing. It's enough. Eternal God Shang Jin looked at the situation and calculated in his heart. It was about the same. With the addition of three-eyed Eternal God, Whale Swallow Eternal God, and Golden Arrow Eternal God, 9 against 9, they basically had the absolute advantage. Unless, damn it, they're all here. Shang Jin's expression changed instantly. He was also a little jealous. Universe 7's Divine Inquisition had always acted separately and rarely cooperated with each other. However, the 7th Mercenary Alliance was very united. Almost all the 14 Yuan venerates of the 7th Mercenary Alliance had come for a mere venerate. It seems like we still have to take action. Yuan venerate Tian Wang chuckled. Yes. City Lord Qian Zun also appeared. The two of them were the 2 most senior Yuan venerates among the 14 Yuan venerates. They were from the same era as Patriarch Taiqiong and had founded the 7th Mercenary Alliance together. City Lord Qian Zun oversaw Qianzun City, while Yuan venerate Tian Wang oversaw the Tian Wang Mystic Realm to cultivate new forces for the 7th Mercenary Alliance and rarely took action. In terms of strength, City Lord Qian Zun and Yuan venerate Tian Wang weren't too strong, but they definitely weren't weak either. They had already reached the limit of a peak Yuan venerate after tens of thousands of epochs of cultivation. Although they weren't comparable to Yuan venerate Tian Wang, the difference wasn't too big. They were much stronger than Yuan venerate Yi Dao and Yuan venerate Hermit. As powerhouses of the previous generation, they were too lazy to take action if they could. After all, they had long stopped caring about the affairs of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. However, they still had to lend a helping hand to the younger generation. Tian Huang, how long has it been since we fought side by side? City Lord Qian Zun asked with a smile. Countless times. Yuan venerate Tian Huang also smiled. Although the two of them hadn't fought together for tens of thousands of epochs, their cooperation was as tacit as ever. They weren't at a disadvantage even though they were fighting 2 against 3. Even though Three-Eyed was strong, Whale Swallow had fierce resistance, and Golden Arrow's attacks were mysterious. The two of them were still calm and composed. They were very experienced. City Lord Qian Zun and Yuan venerate Tian Huang were still as good as ever. When they were young, they had honed their skills in the Hongmeng Sea together with Patriarch Taiqiong and had the best tacit cooperation. That forever fellow should be unable to hold himself back any longer. City Lord Qian Zun forced Three-Eyed Eternity God away. His defense was impregnable. Yuan venerate Tian Huang followed up with an attack. The two of us are just here to join in the fun. It's okay to exchange pointers with the younger generation, but leave forever to him. Is he here? City Lord Qian Zun glanced around. Should be. Yuan venerate Tian Huang smiled. I've already informed him. That's good. City Lord Qian Zun defended against another sharp golden arrow. In terms of defense, he could be considered the best among the 14 Yuan venerates. No matter how well Three-Eyed and Golden Arrow worked together, there were still no flaws. While they were talking, sorry I'm late. A hearty laugh was heard. The voice echoed between heaven and earth. The newcomer's figure was extremely strong, even stronger than Sacred Gold's. He had a bald head, slender eyebrows, and the most eye-catching thing about him was his arms. His abundant and perfect source power was condensed to the extreme, as if he could destroy everything in the universe. The strongest power, Yuan venerate Yunmen. Among the 14 Yuan venerates, his strength was comparable to that of the poor Yuan Venerate. His arrival immediately roused the morale of the powerhouses of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Even the poor Yuan Venerate relaxed a little as the pressure on him lessened. At the moment, Yuan Venerate Yunmin was still carrying a person. A gourd was hanging from his waist, and his head was hanging down. Yuan Venerate Yunmin was grabbing him by the collar like an eagle grabbing a chick. It took me some time to find this enigmatic gourd. Ha ha ha. Yuan Venerate Yunmin laughed and threw Yuan Venerate gourd like a javelin in the distance, where Golden Arrow was. Chapter 2653. Yuan Venerate gourd, like Yuan Venerate explosion, was one of the 3 independent Yuan Venerates that did not belong to the 7 main factions. He was known as a taciturn gourd because he was taciturn and not good at socializing. A total of 13 out of the 14 Yuan Venerates of the 7th Mercenary Alliance had arrived. Their cohesiveness was so strong that even eternal god Shengjin was envious. If Universe 7's Divine Tribunal had such cohesiveness, and if Hope and Forever had come to his aid, would he be in such a sorry state now? Eternal god Shengjin started to panic when he saw Yuan Venerate gourd charging toward Eternal god Golden Arrow and Yuan Venerate Moon Gate charging toward Eternal god Three-Eyed. They had been evenly matched before, but once Yuan Venerate Moon Gate joined in, the balance would be completely broken. Yuan Venerate Moon Gate was too strong. Joining any battle could affect the outcome of the battle. Most importantly, no other Great Ian God could stop Yuan Venerate Yunmin apart from Shengjin Great Ian God himself. However, Shengjin Great Ian God was currently being held back by a destitute Yuan Venerate. Forever Bastard, he will bear the greatest responsibility if we fail to complete the mission this time. Eternal God, Shengjin, cursed silently. After preparing for so long, he had hoped to wipe out the 7th Mercenary Alliance in one go. Even if he couldn't remove the 7th Mercenary Alliance from the 5 big shots, he could at least take them and the other 5 big shots down a notch. If the 5 big shots were so unyielding in the future, Universe 7's Divine Tribunal would lose its status. They couldn't afford to lose this battle. Come out forever! Eternal God, Shengjin, roared angrily. He didn't believe that Forever would be so careless. It was more likely that he was hiding in the dark to watch him make a fool of himself. Forever, Yuan Venerate Moongate, Yuan Venerate Moongate, and the other Yuan Venerate powerhouses turned pale. Universe 7's Divine Tribunal was a super powerhouse, second only to Eternal God Hope and stronger than Eternal God Shengjin. If he also came, the situation wouldn't be optimistic. Had he come? Or was Eternal God Shengjin trying to scare them? You are too useless, Shengjin. A voice seemed to come from an endless distance. The Yuan Venerates suddenly realized that the flow of time had become extremely slow. The voice that entered their ears made them tremble with fear. A huge wheel of time appeared in the void, as though it was a countdown to life and entering judgment. Tick-tick, the voice fell. Eternal God of eternity, the controller of time. In the primal universe, the eternal Ian God represented the pinnacle of time cultivation. It represented the limit and perfection of time control. His appearance made the universe gods of Universe 7's adjudicator of gods feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Bastard. Although Shengjin was cursing, he couldn't hide the smile in the corner of his eyes. The eternal Ian God was one of the strongest existences in the Origin universe. Dang, dang. The wheel of time slowly rotated. Every time it changed, it brought with it an aura that made one's heart palpitate. It was as if life had reached its end and was about to come to an end. The eternal Ian God wore a godfather's robe and held a scepter in his hand. His eyes were closed as if he were the ruler of all things in the world. Like the clouds and the wind, he walked slowly, giving people a feeling that he was sacred and inviolable. It shocked the entire universe. Time seemed to have stopped at that moment. The battle seemed to have come to an end. Everything seemed to be in the eternal grasp of the great Ian God. But suddenly clang, A demonic sound entered one's ears, shrill and mournful. A terrifying sound, like the roar of 10,000 great demons, forcibly tore apart this brief moment of tranquility, broke the rule of time, and collapsed the momentum created by the eternal Ian God. Chi. It was a spear filled with endless demonic energy. It was black and translucent, containing endless energy. There was no aura of primal chaos, only an indescribable strength. The spear seemed to hide an ancient superdemon. It roared mournfully as it flew over from the distance and heavily bombarded the giant wheel of time. Dang! The wheel of time shattered, and the passage of time vanished. The eternal Ian God's expression changed. His eyes widened, and a cold light flashed in them. His previous calm and carefree demeanor disappeared without a trace. This was a supreme chaos treasure, but it couldn't block the throw of the spear filled with demonic energy. There was only one possibility. Homing's source item, an extremely powerful Homing's source item. In the entire universe, there was only one spear, Bone Nightmare Spear. Clang! The Bone Nightmare demonic spear, which had shattered the giant wheel of time, vibrated violently, as if it had endless vitality. A young man slowly walked out from the end of the void. He had black hair and several exquisite demonic patterns on his face. His entire body exuded an indescribable majestic aura. With a wave of his hand, the Bone Nightmare demonic spear flew back and landed in his right hand as if it was a part of his body. "You're here." Yuan Venerate Tian Huang smiled. "It's good that you're here." City Lord Qianzun nodded with relief. The rich Yuan Venerates, the evil Yuan Venerates, and the poor Yuan Venerates all smiled. His appearance was like a shot in the arm, filling them with confidence. Even if they were facing the seventh universe's divine tribunal, they were fearless. No matter how bad the situation was, they would be able to turn the tide. Yuan Venerate Demonic Spear. The 14 Yuan Venerates of the 7th Mercenary Alliance were all present. In terms of strength, the strongest person in the 7th Mercenary Alliance was neither the poor Yuan Venerate nor the evil Yuan Venerate, but the unremarkable young man in front of them. It had only been tens of thousands of eras since he was born, but he was truly invincible in the original universe. He was the face of the 7th Mercenary Alliance and the strongest Yuan Venerate in the 7th Mercenary Alliance. He was a super powerhouse that truly stood at the peak of the original universe. Your opponent is me. Yuan Venerate Demonic Spear glared coldly at eternal Ian God as demonic chi surged from his body. He didn't say anything superfluous. His personality was just like the Bone Nightmare demonic spear in his hand. He was fierce and direct as he charged at eternal Ian God. His philosophy was to fight. Fight constantly. Only by fighting could one become stronger. Only by fighting could one solve all problems. In the path of the universe, the strong were respected. This was a soul-stirring battle, a battle between the powerhouses of the universe. No one was willing to take a step back. It could be said that this had nothing to do with Lin Feng, as this wasn't a battle that Lin Feng could influence alone. Lin Feng was standing at the border of the Taichung deity realm, watching this battle with his own eyes. Beside him was his teacher, Supreme Venerate Anqing. Lin Feng had originally intended to bear the burden alone and leave, as he didn't want to drag the 7th Mercenary Alliance down. However, he had been stopped by his teacher, Supreme Venerate Anqing. To be precise, he had been stopped by Yuan Venerate Fuguwei. Yuan Venerate Fuguwei had clearly known that Lin Feng would leave right from the start, so he had asked Supreme Venerate Anqing to wait there. Although they hadn't interacted much, Yuan Venerate Fuguwei knew his junior brother's character very well. "This is a battle of reputation," Supreme Venerate Fuguwei said. "If you leave now, regardless of whether you are willing or not, it will cause great damage to the reputation of the 7th Mercenary Alliance. Do you understand?" "I understand." Lin Feng nodded. Chapter 2654. Lin Feng was well aware of this. No matter how much he tried to clarify, the entire universe would think that he had been forced to leave. They would think that the Seventh Mercenary Alliance had no choice but to acquiesce or even force him to leave due to the pressure of Universe 7's Divine Tribunal. Therefore, he couldn't leave. Even if he did, it definitely wouldn't be now. Universe 7's Divine Tribunal had stepped on his face. If he didn't fight back, how could the Seventh Mercenary Alliance establish itself in the universe in the future? They would become a laughingstock. For a powerhouse, benefits were secondary. Reputation was the most important. Once the Seventh Mercenary Alliance became weak, how could they compete with the other 5 powerhouses and attract the super geniuses of a universe to join them? The 5 powerhouses needed fresh blood to maintain a strong competitiveness and endure for a long time. Yuan Venerate Demonic Spear was actually a newcomer. However, he was already famous and had shocked the entire universe with his Bone Nightmare Demonic Spear. Everyone knew him. Some things couldn't be stopped once they started. "Don't worry, we are very strong," Supreme God Anqing said. Universe 7's Divine Tribunal will definitely not be able to take down Taiqiong, revered God's realm. They won't even be able to take half a step inside. Yuan Venerate Fu has already arranged everything. Even if Universe 7's Divine Tribunal goes all out today, and even the eternal God of the Netherworld comes, it will still be useless. We have a secret alliance with the Time Virtual Company. When the time comes, the Yuan Venerate powerhouses of the Time Virtual Company will also come one after another. There will even be Yuan Venerate powerhouses from the space 30,000 boundaries, murdering God Tower and Universe Bank. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. The 5 powerhouses couldn't be underestimated. Today, Universe 7's Divine Tribunal could come to the 7th Mercenary Alliance to ask for people. In the future, they could also go to the Time Virtual Company and the space 30,000 boundaries to ask for people who would be able to confirm a groundless accusation with the will of the heavenly Great Path. Therefore, the 5 powerhouses absolutely wouldn't allow Universe 7's Divine Tribunal to cross their bottom line. Yeah, Lin Feng also knew that some things were too simple. Standing in the position of the eldest senior brother, he could see more and see further and not limited to a small war. As the eldest senior brother had said, he could stay in Taiqiong, revered God's realm, and cultivate in peace. After today's battle, he was even more certain. However, Lin Feng also knew that things were far from over. This war was just the beginning, a prologue. As long as he was still in Taiqiong Zun God's domain, Universe 7's Godly Inquisition would not let him go. Even if they were willing, the will of the Heavenly Tao would not be willing. They would definitely do everything in their power to kill him, just like how they killed Senior Yellow Spring back then. For the sake of great benefits, he had alienated the 5 giants and even bewitched the Almighties. Was he really going to continue sheltering under eldest senior brother's wings and accept such a huge favor? Could he really turn a blind eye to the sacrifice of the 7th Mercenary Alliance's venerables and Huangzun just to protect himself? Lin Feng was unwilling to walk such a cowardly path. They would rather die in battle, or even die like Senior Yellow Spring, than hide in the Taiqiong God realm, compromise, and let eldest senior brother become a burden to them, and let the 7th Mercenary Alliance suffer. That would be very unmanly. If you really want to leave, wait until you've won this battle and leave openly. How could Supreme God Anqing not see through Lin Feng's thoughts? He knew his disciple too well, and he had a deep pride and self-esteem in his heart. "I will, teacher," Lin Feng replied. This was the most tragic war in the last million eras. Last time, it had to be traced back to the rise of the God-murdering tower, where they defeated a giant to reach the top and become one of the 5 giants. Although today's battle was not as tragic as that time, it was not to be outdone. Moreover, this was the first time the 5 giants and Universe 7's Godly Inquisition clashed. Prison-breaking Eternal God, dead. Whale-swallowing Eternal God, dead. Yuan Venerate Dao, Yin Yang Eternal God, Black Flame Eternal God, and the others were seriously injured. This was a rather tragic battle. In the end, Universe 7's Godly Inquisition was defeated. Eternal God and Sacred Gold Eternal God were unwilling to retreat. This battle shook the entire universe. For the first time, Universe 7's godly inquisition entered the eyes of the entire universe as a faction. Although they had lost this battle, it was still a glorious defeat. After all, they had only mobilized half of their strength. However, they had almost defeated the 7th Mercenary Alliance, which had gone all out. As for the 7th Mercenary Alliance, its strength and cohesion were even more astonishing. Universe 7's godly inquisition was a transcendent existence in the origin universe. However, today, they have been defeated, and two eternal gods, who were comparable to peak Yuan venerates, had been injured. As for the eternal gods, they had suffered even more casualties. Although they were not seriously injured, they had undoubtedly lost face. Yuan venerate, demonic spear, poor Yuan venerate, rich Yuan venerate. All sorts of legendary names were mentioned. The other four giants were also secretly estimating their own strength. Who was stronger compared to the 7th Mercenary Alliance? If they had gone up against Universe 7's godly inquisition, who would have won? Although the 7th Mercenary Alliance had won this battle, they had also suffered great losses. Several Yuan Venerate powerhouses had been seriously injured, including Yuan Venerate Dao and Yuan Venerate Hermit. The casualties of the godly Venerate powerhouses were extremely severe. As for the deaths of Huang Zun and the ordinary Venerates, there was no need to mention them. Powerhouses at the Venerate level were the foundation of any force. These ordinary Venerates might become Huang Zun, godly Venerates, or even Yuan Venerates in the future. In a war between giants, there were very few true victors. As the saying went, killing 10,000 enemies meant sacrificing 8,000 of one's own men. Furthermore, the reason the 7th Mercenary Alliance had started a war with Universe 7's Godly Inquisition was because of a young fellow who had just become a Venerate. Even though Lin Feng was the disciple of Patriarch Taizong, it was inevitable that people would gossip behind his back. "Are you leaving?" Yuan Venerate Fugue glanced at Lin Feng and didn't seem surprised at all. "Yes, senior brother." Lin Feng had a calm expression on his face. He had already decided on the day of the battle that he had stayed behind because of his teacher. However, since the battle had ended and the outcome had been decided, there was no point in staying any longer. "Is it useless for senior brother to urge you to stay?" Yuan Venerate Fugue chuckled. Lin Feng replied with a smile. Thousands of words were contained in the silence. Yuan Venerate Fugue nodded and stood up to pat Lin Feng on the shoulder. "Everyone has their own aspirations, so I won't force you. However, remember that the 7th Mercenary Alliance will always be your home, and Taizong and I will always be your senior brothers. If you really can't hold on any longer, come back. Here, with me around, no one can take you away." "I will, senior brother." Lin Feng felt a surge of warmth in his heart as he hugged Yuan Venerate Fugue gently. Although they hadn't been senior brothers for long, they were already like family to each other. "Go." Yuan Venerate Fugue smiled faintly. "Say goodbye to your second senior brother." "All right." Lin Feng turned his head and saw his second senior brother, Taizong, leaning against the door of the hall with his arms crossed.